Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 42 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host, Tyler Schatz, who's still upset about how they massacred my boy, Jon Snow. Joining me this fine recording sessioner one, Stephen Howard.
Who, on the behalf of all political scientists, says one big sigh.
Amanda Howard.
Who was prepared for a much longer winter, but I think spring's coming.
Yeah.
One Nick Castillo.
The world will always need a home for bastards and broken men.
And then last, but certainly never ever least, one Gary Delaney.
Tyrion asked, "What unites people?" And I found the answer: hatred for this episode.
Jeez. That's actually...
Right
That was
out the
probably
gate.
one of his least controversial openings, honestly.
Oh.
I took notes ahead of time, everyone. I wrote this down while taking other notes. I was like, oh, well, here'd be a good intro. Like, not great. Obviously nothing, like, I think last episode, top 5 tier for all of my intros.
Do these, like, visions just come to you, Gary, when you're watching the episode? It's just like you go into a state of mind. It's just like, oh, I gotta write this down.
I don't know. You just notice stuff. I didn't really have anything. But yes, I just have vision quests. Sometimes I listen to Nick's voice and I go on a vision quest as I imagine being in a better place.
Whew, shots fired.
Shots fired.
Just gonna keep it all bottled down. Not even gonna react.
Well, as we've kind of alluded to here, we are here to discuss the finale for Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 6, titled The Iron Throne. In the aftermath of the devastating attack on King's Landing, Daenerys must face the survivors. And that is kind of a not fully formed explanation of the episode there, because Daenerys is in the episode for all of about the first half hour, maybe.
Yep.
And this is an episode that runs for, if I remember right, like what, an hour and 30 some minutes?
Yeah, about.
It's like the longest.
It went by in a
episode.
flash.
True.
It went by in a flash.
Okay. So that reminded me then here too, before we get into completely discussing the negatives of the episode, which I know we have a lot of, I'm going to pull this trick back out. Say something positive about the episode that you enjoyed. I'll give everyone a little bit of time to sit here and think about it, unless you're ready to go.
Super cool image of Dany with the wings behind her, the dragon.
Totally.
Yeah, it was
not
a
symbolic
great
of
fascist
anything.
image.
Yeah.
No.
It was a cool image, honestly,
Yeah.
and like they didn't
And Nazis
overplay
had
it.
great
They did it.
images. All about imagery.
Okay, the audience can't hear this. I am shaking my head. I thought that was just heavy-handed effing symbolism. Like, imagine freshman level filmography. Like, that's what I thought it was. It wasn't inspirational. It wasn't happenstance. It was very intentional and very heavy-handed.
Back to the
Like,
positives, Gary.
if the dragon slowly enters frame, I can understand. But it was like, she landed, she walked, dragon wings, dragon flew away. Like, it was way too heavy-handed. Sorry. I had bent over.
That was a much more controversial thing that I thought for saying it, because I was like, oh wow, everyone's gonna agree this is such a cool scene. I thought it was neat. I thought it was enough. It's not subtle by any means, but it's a slight subtleness that, like, oh, that could be. You could reason that they would see her. That I thought it was a cool scene.
The imagery, yes, is very cool of what it looks like, but the subtlety to it is definitely not there.
So I have a positive for this episode. Edmure gets told to sit down, literally.
That was good.
That was good.
I'll give
They
that one
did it
thumbs
so
up.
pleasantly too. Uncle, please sit.
Yep.
Like,
Because
ouch,
I
that was
think
almost
he's-
worse.
I think he's been so unassured throughout the whole series, like a very like consistent character of like the disappointing son who can't hit his father's burial thing with an arrow, like someone who gave up his castle for his child, like just a disappointing person. And I think they nailed it. Like he obviously be like, well, I'm here. I'm very handsome. I'm very young. I might as well take a swing at this. And until somebody just stops and says, we're just going to stop you there. We're not going to let you embarrass yourself any more than you already have. I'll let Nick go in front of me.
Looks like
I
there's
have no
3 more
idea.
people.
Yeah.
That's very kind of you. My positive about this episode is resolution. A very poor resolution, but I do appreciate the conclusion. It's not a culmination by any means, because there's several arcs that just kind of go nowhere at the end when you find out it's done. But I appreciate a conclusion in the
Would
sense
you-
that they're like, ta-da, and that's it.
Would you say the finality to it, or is that even too much of a sharper point to put on it there?
That's even too much of a sharper point, because they leave several episode stories that I think would have been interesting. Like Arya goes off into the west, and Jon takes the wildlings north to do what? I don't know. And so
The
it's not really,
Unsullied sail off to do their thing. The dragon flies off to do his thing.
yeah, which is, I have a note about the dragon flying off too when we get there, but the dragon flies off and Sam at the small council says something like, yeah, it's flying to the east, and they cut him off. And so we don't even hear like the one note about what something went off to go do. So it's a positive that I like that this is the end of the story, because then you can gauge it as a whole. Not very positively, but I appreciate a finality to it. Like if it ended with more cliffhangers than it already left it with, I think it'd be even more hard to try and wrap your head around.
Carrie?
I guess not using Nick's word finality, but kind of a different part of that is like actually seeing the finish of specific arcs and seeing where Sam ends up versus where he started, like kind of the finish, because it is some of the things they definitely rush through, but I think like if I knew how to read gooder, I would be super excited to read these books when they come out.
They'll never come out, so don't worry. You can read as good enough as you want.
I'll be in my 80s and I'll have to they'll have some robot that'll just like transcribe it into my brain and it'll be fine. But
Don't let
I think
society
a lot
tell you. Don't let society tell you otherwise, Gary. You're gooder enough as it is.
Yes. Anyway, I think just I appreciated the end of some of the storylines and plots. Like I think there's definitely good material, and I think the writers only got spark notes.
I don't like the endings for some of the characters, but I was telling Steven as we were watching this episode that I honestly do. The one thing I do like is George R. R. Martin doesn't really write this as if it's a story that has to end happily. Like he's always written, especially when reading Fire and Blood, like he's always written it as a history. Like that's not how history works. Just because you like this character doesn't mean they get the happy ending. And so I don't like several parts of the episode because I selfishly want it to be what I wanted for these characters. But I do like the number of different endings, the things that don't happen the way you want them. In reality, the person you think should be king doesn't just end up magically there, even if he should.
Tyler, you're the only one that hasn't given us one.
I thought you haven't gone yet, Stephen.
I already gave mine.
Did-
It was
Edmure
just
got told to sit
forgettable.
down.
My bad. Completely just blanked that off there.
Honestly, as soon as you said it, Tyler, I blanked off too because I was like, I feel like Steven said something, but I couldn't remember what it was.
I second Steven. He said something. Tyler's a fool. Carry on.
I mean, Steven said something. Was
for,
it?
for me, my I guess the thing I enjoyed the most about the episode was the kind of the final conversation Tyrion and Jon had, basically the not battle of wits there, but basically the discussion of doing what is right versus doing what is necessary, and what for the better good or for just the here and now and stuff like that. So it kind of harkened back to basically like when Tyrion was a good character and Jon John was kind of pushed to do something outside of his comfort there. I mean, killing people necessarily isn't outside of John's comfort, but the slyness in which he had to perform the killing there basically was not something John does. So to me, like watching that felt like one of the more powerful scenes we've had kind of in the last few episodes here of just, again, as Game of Thrones was always so good for, of just characters sitting in a room talking to one another. Two characters who have had very different life experiences talking about ultimately what needs to be done for the betterment of the realm. And yeah, that's something else I had on my mind, but that's more for a different discussion later. So, the one thing I wanted to, there's actually, I guess, two kind of parts I want to just touch on a little bit here, before we go into too much questioning. So the introduction was updated for the final time there, with King's Landing itself shown as being burned and stuff like that, destroyed. But strangely
To an
enough,
extent.
though, they went into the Red Keep and stuff, and that was all still fine, which I thought that was
Yep.
kind of half-assed of them not doing it the full way through.
The only thing in the Red Keep I noticed is the lion isn't there in the window in the intro credits.
I was going to ask, did they take away sigils from cities in this season? Because I specifically, when they hovered over King's Landing, I was going to try to see if it had a dragon sigil or a lion sigil, but it was just like a blurred like button. Like, I don't know if they just took away the sigils this season altogether. But
Like
there was no
over each house there.
Imagine a cog that kind of comes up, and there's usually a sigil in the center. If it's in Winterfell, it's a wolf. If it's in King's Landing, it was a lion.
Yeah,
I didn't see any sigil. I don't know if they just removed sigils altogether with their updated intro.
I don't remember that
Good
stuff either
catch.
there, Gary. So, and we've.
I mean,
done-
I remember over Winterfell because for a while it was replaced with the Bolton's flayed man.
Yeah.
But for this season specifically, now that we're talking about it, I don't remember there being the sigils in the spots where they would have been. Then again, they
But
didn't
you
really
noticed that there was something different about King's Landing in the intro. I didn't notice anything.
So the
like,
outside part of King's Landing, where they showed the Great Wall, not the Great Wall, but the wall that was out there where Dany blew the dragon's breath through the first part to attack the Golden Company there. That was all destroyed and everything like that. But when they went further into the Red Keep, the castle part of King's Landing there, where the king and queen would normally be, that was still, it seemed like, perfectly fine. There was no destruction to it really.
And they still had the skull in the dragon skulls in the basement, which I thought they destroyed, or they'd hit with a ballista. So I thought that would just
I mean,
falling masonry.
There was the episode where they showed Qyburn showing Cersei the ballista there, the scorpion, to shoot through the skull, but they never showed that on the introduction. And then even further in this episode, when Tyrion is walking through the destruction in the basement there, the skull is there, but it is damaged from all of the rubble that had fallen on it. Steven, you got something for us?
So I actually have the show up here, and so I went back to the intro just to kind of check out some of the cities. Even Winterfell doesn't have the Stark set on it.
But I was going to say, did that start this season? I'd have to go back and look at others.
Yeah, I don't ever pay attention to the credits. So
I just noted.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. I just remember at the very end of the King's Landing one, it usually ended with the window behind the Iron Throne, and it used to be I don't remember if it used to be the stag in the beginning of the seasons, but it was the 7-pointed star for a while, and then when Cersei became the only unabashed ruler, it was a lion, and then this episode it was like a broken, empty window. And I don't usually notice the credits because Tyler always has those details down pat.
For real.
the one time
but this time I was like, oh, hey, I noticed it.
I feel like it was just this last season, season 8, where they actually flew through Winterfell and through the Red Keep. Before it was just the towers that came up in King's Landing. So we might not have seen if it was previously the Baratheon stag, because it's only in this season been Cersei and it's been a Lannister lion. Steven?
Just pulled up. See, I'm just doing a bunch of research now. Season 8, episode 1. They don't have the sigils on there either. So yeah, it might just
Okay.
be
Wow.
this season.
They only had
Well-
enough money in the budget to put sigils on or show the damage in the buildings.
Not
Can't have both.
It was the
You know,
ice
this is
road
like-
that took all the money.
We talk every several episodes about all these things they do in the intro, but like in the first watch through and like 90% of the watchers, like, does anyone ever pay attention to the intro? Like,
Tyler
once
and
you
you
got
do.
it on streaming,
Tyler
it
and you
defaults
do.
to skip it.
Well, I
I-
mean,
like-
we've all watched these episodes at least twice now, and we're still missing details, which is fascinating. But I do enjoy watching it every once in a while. It gives a lot of it's nostalgia, though, but I don't notice all the details.
And for me, I always
I've
liked
definitely
watching
been
it.
paying
Just,
more attention to it.
I was gonna say I always liked watching it just to the kind of know where everything is at roughly when they were talking. Like I don't think I watched it all the time when I first watched this through, but I've probably also
I
watched more of these episodes more than most people here in this group. At least
I
the
like that
early
they do it.
episodes.
I like all the little hidden details that you can search for. I mean, I don't know how many times I've watched this show, but like I'm still missing these things.
And then to move on to another minor point I wanted to talk about here too was just the varying degree of body composition scattered throughout the ruins of King's Landing.
Ugh.
You're
Yeah,
either
for real.
dust, you're dead underneath rubble, you're burned slightly, or you're somehow a skeleton just sitting in a cafe there.
I was a fan of the random dude who's just like half burned with his
Yeah,
bare
walking.
bones.
I was
still.
going to mention him too.
Just like chilling, walking past everybody's like, "Hey, what's up? I'm gonna go out the front door here."
Yeah, that
I think
that was,
we.
I'm sorry. I was gonna say that was a very cool thing because it's like the aftershock of the attack and everything. I'm more just commenting sillily on the fact that like we see skeletons around there. It's like so the dragon fire burns hot enough to burn the flesh and muscle off, but leaves the skeleton. Or there's just some people who are slightly charred. It's like there's no again consistency between the damage that happens to the people there in King's Landing. Stephen.
Oh, that's amazing. Anyways, so I do think that I will agree that the tone of that opening part is pretty cool, but to your point more specifically, Tyler, it has to do with the varying nature of dragonfire and how dragonfire either incinerates, burns, explodes, melts, or whatever you need it to happen to do at that one given time. So I think the inconsistency in dragonfire leads to the inconsistency in the corpses seen in the street.
I'm
Nick.
not defending it. I was just curious if there's like a strafing effect they were trying to go for. Like maybe the dragon has enough built up fire that when it releases like napalm, it hits the first person and they're charred to nothing. Whereas at the end and the dragon swoops up, it just kind of grazes the person at the end with a light burn. I don't know.
I know
I-
we've joked before about how sometimes Drogon's fire breath seems to have the ability to, explode rock or melt or blah blah. But I mean, it showed him burn melting the Iron Throne, and I made a note that Dragonflame made the Iron Throne, and Dragonflame is destroying it, but much faster than it really should have, I would think. I mean, the stones on either side this time aren't exploding, but the swords are just melting instantly. Like, did this dragon who made the Iron Throne, do a very precise little burst of, flame in order to melt the swords the way he did? Or maybe Drogon just has super hot fire. Maybe it's like a dice. Every time he breathes out fire, he doesn't know what ability it's gonna land on that time.
Random breath weapon attack.
Yes.
I know enough about science to be curious if there's like some sort of oxidation or like built up air pockets in the swords after 300 odd years, that if when he breathes fire on it, does the swords of the throne explode to some extent or have some weird side sciencey thing? But also I don't know enough to ask the right questions. But just the thoughts in my head when I was watching part of that episode when he melted the throne.
Like that. I like that.
So I want to get back to Tyler's point, and Tyler's point was that the inconsistency in the bodies in the opening shot there.
Oh,
And
I'm
I do
sorry,
think-
Steven. Are you being nice to Tyler and considering his points?
I'm not. I'm just trying to get us back on track a little bit, Miss. I want to go everywhere all at once. But anyways,
Tyler, I
Hashtag
would like
never
to
be nice to
notice.
Tyler.
I would like to note that he specifically said he wasn't trying to be nice to you.
Hashtag never
Oh,
nice to
man.
Tyler.
Never nice to Tyler. But
Team anti-Tyler for life.
I do think that this is just one of those inconsistency things with just prop sets. I think we're trying to look a little too far into it if we're trying to figure out exactly why there are. I think it's a good thing to note just because it's like noting when someone has like 700 candles on in the background of a scene, right? No one's ever going to do that. It's not a real thing, but it's fun to note. And just like in this case, they're throwing bodies because they're throwing bodies. They want you to go, oh gosh, oh my, oh no, and the depending like it's different if you see two like a bundle of skeletons just in the middle of the street, or if you see a charred woman holding a charred baby, and you're getting a different reaction at that point. So I just think we're thinking a little bit too much into it.
Definitely agree. I just thought it was kind of funny to point that out.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I agree, but I definitely wrote your words down to use against you when you inevitably bring up, historic war strategies.
Hey now.
Final joking point here to kind of touch on for a little bit is Andy the Extra is still there with John's crew. He survived the battle there.
Yay!
But my
Conspiracy theory number 1.
Ooh,
Andy the Extra is actually a clone dropped off in the Clone Wars, and he's just everywhere. That's why you see him so often. He's everywhere.
conspiracy theory has holes in it because he does not look like Jango Fett.
And
Try
I
again.
agree
Doesn't
with
have
Gary
to be
there. That
Jango
went downhill fast. Gary, chalk one up. I agree with you.
Next gen White Walkers.
Ooh.
So my actual point to kick off the thing before I turn it over to somebody else is oh shoot, I had 2 points I wanted to touch on here right away. I'll go with the first point here of Varys's notes. Did they really have any impact? Were they ever sent out? Maybe that's a question for after the episode here too, because like I should say towards the end of the episode, because we saw Varys write all of these notes. He had to have sent some out beforehand. Did they play any part? And like I said, that's probably something more for to discuss when we want to discuss the end of the episode, if we want to save it for now.
I think that's a good idea, but we just definitely should put a pin in it because I do want to discuss it.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
I will bring that up here. But just moving on to my other point before I turn it over to someone else. Tyrion's somber walk through the destruction with Jon and Davos there. It was another like well shot scene there because it's silent. You're only listening to the destruction and carnage really in the background. Everybody is slowly walking, like I said, taking in all the bodies and destruction around there and everything like that. And then you get to look at Jon and Davos there basically too, just having this like, what did we just kind of witness kind of washing over them? So I just kind of wanted to bring that up and throw that out there for somebody else. Nick, go ahead.
I had a comment on that I thought it was oddly quiet. Like you said, just listening to the destruction and whatnot, I thought that it was weird. In a city of 1 million-ish people, even if most of them were killed, I thought it was odd that there wasn't more wailing or like sounds of rubble falling in the background from buildings that were still crumbling, or sounds of small explosions in the background. I mean, it's not like they have, explosive things, but little fire pockets of whatever as buildings crumbled or other things like that in the background from somebody who's selling apothecary type items. I thought there would be more random rubble noise, and I thought it was very quiet. I liked the theme of it being oddly quiet, but it seemed too weirdly quiet, eerie. Steven?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. The atmosphere was it gets the point across. It's the solemn, contemplative march towards the ends that you have finally completed, and they're not the ends that the means actually do matter. It's not only the ends that matter, and they're finding that out. And it's I like the atmosphere that it puts. But on that same note, stone can burn, like for real. It sounds stupid to say, but if you have like a major fire in a city, stone can straight up burn, and so can all the other buildings and everything in there. So it's like I have trouble thinking there would be a wildfire in the city after a dragon attack like that. So where's the continuous wildfire? And that wildfire would engender a whole bunch of people screaming, yelling, crying. There would be people collecting the dead bodies. They'd be going to hell. There'd be people coming off the streets or off from the farms or whatnot, going, "Oh my God, I left my kid and wife in the streets. Now I'm just trying to find their bodies," crying as they're walking through the streets. So yeah, there's it's definitely missing a aspect of realism to get the tone across there, and the tone there actually isn't a look at the destruction. It's a pity, because the three people that we see there as well, it is Varys, not Varys. Varys is dead. It is Tyrion, Jon, and the Onion.
Davos.
Davos. Thank you. And those are the three people who you would say are probably the most innocent, quote unquote, of everyone there. And I think that's why they get those three together. But then the tone also kind of really focuses on them. It's not about the scene around them. It's on their poor pity selves. Look what they have done. And I do find that a little I don't know. I feel like it does a disservice to the destruction they have just wrought, that now they are poor pity themselves and go across and do whatever they want. I don't know what the exact word for that would be. Gary?
Do you feel like those three characters are they're stand-in for the audience, for the shock? Like they're supposed to be a stand-in for the emotional state of the audience, of witnesses. Between the three of them, like most people could connect with, I'm a hero, I'm a Jon,
Sure.
I'm a thinker, I'm a Tyrion, or I'm a, background character, so I'm the Onion Knight. Like, but they all have
Talk about
witnessed
massacring
this.
my boy.
They've all witnessed this atrocity, and they're all sort of trying to contemplate it, because they all went in assuming they were going to fight a battle, but nobody knew the outcome, and nobody would have bet on that outcome when they started the day. And so I think they're just trying to, make resolution with their own morality about how do they move forward as a person from here. Also, both Nick and Steven mentioned like the mediocrity of the soundscape, the mediocrity of the set dressing, and the just general set design. And is that just because they didn't really spend a lot of time on this section? It was a real quick, like, trying to set emotion. Tyler?
I'm not sorry to jump in front of you, Nick, there, but I will push back against the thought that the people who did the set design and stuff like that did a poor job. I think they did a fantastic job with everything that they did. I think it was so this episode was directed also by the two showrunners. So
That was my other note.
I mean,
The D's directed it.
yeah. I don't know if it's completely fair to push back against their horrible idea or whatever, but I do agree there should have been more going on. But I think as overall the set design and everything like that, I think they did a fantastic job with what they were probably told to do. But Nick,
You think? But I just think it was the story was lost in the final edit of making a good soundscape, making a good cinematography of it.
Well, I think they. Sorry, and I'm jumping in front of Nick.
I'll
too
agree
now.
with Tyler. You shouldn't take away somebody's profession just because they are part of a
No,
shitty
and
episode.
I think they
Right.
had to make a choice there. They had to make a choice whether they were going to do storytelling or whether they were going to do realism, and they chose storytelling.
I have a couple little quick notes. I agree with the comments thus far about the scenery. I have seen construction in my background from my college years and post-college years, and yeah, you can design and build something that has taken some laborer days to put together that looks amazing up close, and you may have a director that pans over it for 5 seconds, and somebody who's watching it may not even like be looking in that moment, right, or paying attention to the little nuance of detail that took somebody days to build. So yeah, that's not necessarily on them. I agree. I think somebody said editing. It's on the editing and videography of how that final cut looked. Also, I want to give a shout out to Gary with Steven's big words. Gary, you said the morality of
mediocrity.
the mediocrity or morality of the resolution. Well done. Golf clap, sir. I caught that. That's why I was kind of impressed when that came out.
I don't remember saying those words. I must have blacked out.
Crap. What was your original comment on Tyler? Because you had commented on it. That's what I originally raised my finger for.
It was just the somber walkthrough of Tyrion, Davos, and Jon through there, and then everyone else kind of added on too of like their kind of stand-ins for the audience there to show the horror that was wrought.
That's what it
partially by
was. That's
the-
what it was. I was thinking almost a little bit to agree with Gary. Gary, you can put a Nick agrees on the poor writing sign you held up, because that seemed like a very quick flip for those characters where even if they didn't believe that was an outcome, they went in thinking we're going to attack the city, we're going to go after the soldiers. And I think the realization of, oh crap, we had a dragon on our side. This was an outcome that could have happened where everybody got burned by this giant beast and dragon. And there's been little flashes like we've highlighted in the previous episodes where Dany has shown that she may not be as her countenance may not be as held in check as she thought she was going to be. So yeah, exactly like you said, a little bit of poor writing in the flip there. I think it would have been, I probably would have believed it a little bit more in that scene if the three characters were more like guilt-ridden or ashamed that this is what happened. The fact that they seemed in shock, it's like, what did you think would happen? The second the dragon goes loose and she hops off the ledge, it would have been more realistic if they all were like, oh no, and realize this is it, we're screwed. And to be more ashamed that we kind of let this happen, I think would have been a much better choice for how it could have been written.
And to go back to the point that I was saying earlier as well, and this is just exactly what you were saying, I feel like the show wants me to feel bad for these three people that are now walking in. Like it wants me to focus my sadness on what just happened on them and go, oh God, how must they feel? And they don't have a nick on them really. Like they're a little frayed, little dusted, but there's nothing that happened to them. And I think it does a disservice to what just happened. And I'll be very honest, it does a disservice to the grand storytelling that George R.R. Martin does, right? His grand storytelling is focused on the plight of everyone around. Like you had the one scene where Lolly's back where Joffrey was walking through the city, and it's the chaos of Lolly's getting taken and she is assaulted. You have people, the Kingsguard starts killing people, and it's focused on the grand scale of everyone's terror at that time. And this is really focused on just these three people in a horrific event, and how bad must these three, like, you're watching three, I hate to bring it back to this again, but this is just where my head is going right now. You're watching three, German guards stare at a concentration camp going, oh, I feel so bad for myself that I did this.
I was just reflecting on what Nick said about these three characters and how they're in shock and all that. And then I was going to defend them for like a half second that none of these characters had seen true war or battle. Tyrion got knocked out in the battle. All of them have survived the battle of Winterfell. But then I kind of like flipped completely on Davos because Davos has seen absolute fiery incineration at the Battle of Blackwater Bay. Like Davos woke up on a rock watching
His
an
kid's
entire
dead.
fleet burn. Yeah, and his kid is dead. Like, so Davos should not be shocked by this. Like Davos has seen just like absolute destruction. Tyler?
John's there too. I mean, John has seen Dragonfire.
John has seen it, yeah.
This is a minor technicality for you, Gary. Davos really didn't witness too much of the Battle of Blackwater Bay, if we're going by the show, because he was on the ship, got blown off the ship into the water, and then you don't see him until next episode on the rock. But I mean,
I'll accept your point.
your point still
but-
stands though, of like he has probably enough experience though with other battles that he was a part of or around or something like that, because he was the one who freed Stannis's or gave Stannis's forces food when they were at the siege on, was it the siege on
Mhm.
Dragonstone or Storm's End?
No, Storm's End.
Okay, siege at Storm's End. Go ahead though, Nick.
So I tried to give this episode the benefit of the doubt. Seeing the show and this episode, particularly like Tyler said, we're trying to focus on in its, again, quote unquote, finality. There was a lot that I was trying to give it the benefit of the doubt and see where it was coming from or what they were trying to do. And we've talked about it. I don't agree that they deserve pity or pour them in this episode. But I do think that there's, at least in the realm of what the characters may have been thinking in that moment, because we're trying to perceive when they were actually talking, I think they're trying to highlight, like, they didn't think that this was an outcome that could actually happen. And I'll be honest, when I first saw this episode, these last few episodes, I didn't think that the show would end the way that it did. And so I can agree with that shock value. Going back and watching this episode, just leading up to this episode, we see little flashes that this might be a possibility, that the show may not end the way you think it's going to end if you think this has a happy ending. And I just kind of feel like it's weird to have the rug pulled out from underneath you, and people like Tyrion or Jon, especially later on in this episode, I've got a lot of notes on Jon about what he says that really highlights what he must be thinking. Like, he even says, like, she's my queen, that's her choice. It's like, no, it's not. The second you genocide and slaughter a city, you don't get to make a choice between what's good and not anymore, good or bad anymore. And it's this thought that these characters never thought this was a possibility. And so it's probably more so the shock that, yes, this happened and we let it happen, but also, like, thinking, well, if it happens, maybe it won't be that bad, and then seeing it in its true form in the varying degrees of the innocent and the people who are slaughtered, and the brutality of it all is probably what's the most abhorrent.
Great points there, Nick, about I even tried to do that too when I was rewatching this episode, to try and take it in more of set aside my thoughts and feelings about how I felt about how the show ended, watch it for what it was, and just kind of see, was there something I was missing from the intent that they were trying to get across in the show there. And I will say this too, as we kind of continue on talking about this episode, I think this episode is, even though it's an hour and a half long, it's still a very clear example of this show needed to go longer. Like, so many of the different beats throughout this episode could have been entire parts of episodes for a full, like, season here. Steven.
I specifically counted, like, entirely agree with what you're saying, because I specifically was thinking about that. One of my points was, I think I count 3 episodes in this one episode. You have the first half, which is the city. You have, or I should say the first third, which is the city. You have the second third, which is dealing with Daenerys. And you have the last third, which is dealing with the aftermath of, like, the close. These are 3 very separate ideas. And that's, like, why we'd say Dany's out of this picture by the half-hour mark. It makes no sense to me to do that. And for how rushed everything, this is sorry, getting my words together here. Like what you say, this is like an hour and a half episode, and it feels rushed. I didn't realize how rushed it felt until I watched it a second time, and I'm going, surely I missed something in between this and this, because it just feels like it skips, and that's because it does.
I'm going to get boos from the rest of the group, but it felt like a very much Lord of the Rings ending, where it's like, okay, we're going to end the show, but one more thing. And then we're going to end this, but one more thing. Like,
so mark this down, Gary. I agree with you. Specifically, there was a point at the end where it's like, it, like, shows this shot of something and then, like, fades to black or cuts out. I was like, wait, what? And then it kind of kept going after that then too. So it was like that very much felt like the way the Return of the King ended there, where it was like fade to black, new scene, fade to black again. So that
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, I very much felt that, and I think I even thought like that's reminiscent Lord of the Rings right there a little bit there too. But oh, I had another thought here that just kind of vanished as well. Go ahead though, Nick. Take over while I sit here and think more.
I just want the record to show that Gary allowed a boo against him, and I want it marked that I booed on merit alone.
What boo? What boo? I don't understand.
You said the group would boo with me, so I said boo on you.
Oh, you booed on merit alone. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's one reference. We've only got a Lord of the Rings. We got. I'm gonna try to keep count now.
We have plenty of time to keep adding more pop culture references as we go.
That's what we do.
I am going to turn over my time to somebody else here. Let's see who really wants to go next here. Nick, I saw it. I almost thought, wow, maybe we should change it up and give Gary the opportunity to be the next one to go, since I was.
But then you thought better of it because.
Yeah.
You know what? I don't have anything interesting to say about this episode, so that's why I was just like, oh, sure, I'll go next. But yeah, we can go to Nick. This'll eat up at least a half an hour. You're up, Nick.
Ouch. My comment, I guess, is kind of following chronologically from what we just talked about. I had a couple notes on Grey Worm's quote-unquote justice in this episode. Yeah, like again, it's very reminiscent of what we hear Danny say later about they don't get to decide what's good and what's not, what's justice and what's not. And I've made references before how he does not wear his helmet anymore. This is not his duty. He's not a soldier. He's just a vengeful person enacting what he calls justice. And yeah, he's killing prisoners who have surrendered. Davos has the line, "They're already on their knees. What more do you want?" And yeah, it's not good. So that's my main point there. Steven.
I entirely agree with you. And one of the things that I had told Amanda is that I will not refer to that person by that name anymore. You have to refer to him as the great, like something to the extent of the great conqueror Grey Worm, slitter of unarmed throats, or something to that extent, because he's built up to be this great military hero, and that's what he's been this entire time. And they even have like an award ceremony for him. And what's he doing during this episode? He's literally slitting on our like surrendered soldiers' throats. That's literally what he's doing. I did one thing specifically from this point that I wanted to mention that I hadn't noticed before was when they're trying to negotiate for the prisoners, negotiate, quote unquote, when there's the standoff between the Northern soldiers and the Unsullied for the Lannister prisoners. One of the things that Grey Worm says is these were free men. They were able to make their own choices. And I think it was a strange callback to me for how Daenerys wants to free everyone and how she sees all these other people as oppressed, but this one class of enemies, the class of enemies that she's looking at are the free people. It's a strange kind of dichotomy that she is. It seems to be that she is at war with free people. It's the free people who are the ones who deserve death for what they have perpetrated by being free. Amanda?
Audience, I won't tell you just how long Steven spent trying to come up with the perfect nickname for Grey Worm. Like, usually we pause the show for me to take my notes when he rolls his eyes and makes comments. We had to pause for him this time to try to come up with names, and I almost was like, just get a hold of Gary and ask for a good name.
I was asked, and I said there wasn't anything good. I will not support your mediocrity. Like,
but Steve, I think that was a really good point that you made about the the free men though comment, because Dany did keep on saying she was going to free people, and I was been so mad at Grey Worm for a few episodes because of what, like, his complete harshness. He judged them as free and said they made their own choice, and yet, like, he's also, like, he's the one killing these guys and he wants justice for Dany. Well, it was, if killing these soldiers was an act of war, like, how come Dany wasn't as well? Like, he wants a king, but he doesn't want to go by the king's decision. And I thought Grey Worm had an awful lot of. I asked Stephen, what right does Grey Worm have to decide, nope, we're going to do what we want with this city? Okay, excuse me, by what right? And Stephen's right. He's the conqueror's right. He's the military coup, whatever you want to say right there. Like, he's in charge, unfortunately. But I've been wanting to know, like, what happened the last few weeks? Have the Unsullied been keeping, like, such good order in King's Landing? They weren't exactly great at it in Marine. And suddenly he's cool with Jon Snow being carted off to the Night's Watch, an institution that he probably knows nothing about, but he's okay with that. I don't understand Grey Worm, and I absolutely hate him in here. Although I did make a little note about him going off on his little boat trip to the Killer Butterfly Island. I don't know what his goal is there, but maybe that justice will be served there as well then.
I have a note specifically about that stupid freaking line there. I'll save it till later, but I don't
Go
know.
ahead, Gary.
Yeah, Gary.
I actually noted, I originally, somebody before the episode said, oh, well, this and this about Grey Worm. And I was like, honestly, I didn't think I wrote a single note about Grey Worm. And then I have to eat my words. I wrote one note, and that was, I think that he just got oversimplified. I think they, in a rush, I think they oversimplified him to kind of a warmonger. But I think it was a disservice to the character's arc that they slowly started cracking the shell of him just being a soldier and, like, falling in love. And then they just made him very, very one note the last episodes where he's just a soldier. And then the one note I did make was that when in the Council of Lords, he ultimately he could have just said, like, no, we're not going to take your opinion. He just kind of backs down out of nowhere after his, sworn ruler dies. And he just says, like, oh, well, I'll follow whatever this council decides, and we will be the military justice. And I think that's supposed to make the assumption that he is just completely folded with being a conqueror, and he just wants to go back to being a soldier. He just wants to simplify his, like, but yes, I think the complaints about Grey Worm is that I think he just got oversimplified. He got they just rushed him, and he could have been better. But Nick,
I agree sort of with Gary, but I think more so than the conqueror or warmonger, he's the judge, jury, and execution. I see him much more as the judicial arm of the Unsullied now. Like, Missandei was his breaking point. I don't know if anyone else disagrees with me on that, but I think that was kind of the point where he sort of lost who he thought he was going to be in this war, and his main focus in his life was he was falling for Missandei. Then now has become he's just going to slaughter anyone he can who was a Lannister or worked for Cersei. I think, Amanda, you had the original line about how, like, they, or maybe it was Stephen, that they were free people and everyone else is free except Stephen, except for anyone else. But it was like Tyrion or Jaime had given the comment too. That's like, these people aren't free. If they'd gone against Cersei, they would have lost their families and been beaten and thrown on the street. So it's not really like they were willingly inscripted. They're pretty much drafted that they're going to be soldiers in this army for the Lannisters. I think that there's this nuance when we first meet Grey Worm, and he's meant to be this great soldier, but it's like, I'm gonna rule my army, we're gonna kill these people, and everyone claps and cheers. Very similar to what Tyrion said, not to take away from that interaction later on, when Tyrion says they were all evil men, they died, and everyone cheered. And we thought that makes Dany think that she's right and good. Very similar with Grey Worm. They killed all the people of Astapor, all the Unsullied did, and everyone clapped and cheered. They killed all these people we thought and cheered. They killed the innocent people in King's Landing and the Lannisters, and it's like everybody hesitates, but I mean, he's been a soldier. He's been doing that since we've known him. So it's not necessarily that he's one-dimensional. It's that his reasoning for why he's doing it has changed. What I keep seeing in it is that he's doing this, something he's always done. I mean, a soldier is going to attack and maim and kill. That's what soldiers are trained to do. But the reasoning for doing it, he's not attacking soldiers. He's attacking prisoners at that point. He's they were attacking the random innocents in King's Landing, and that is not. But it's hard to make that distinction, you would think. But the blind, yep, we'll go ahead and do it, is what really loses it for me in that episode.
I think that the simplification narrative is probably pretty accurate, and I think he's also hyper masculinized, soldierized. I don't want to narrow the military mindset into like one little thing, but when you think of a very stereotypical mindset, it's the people that, oh, something's happening over in the Middle East. Well, why don't we just glass them? Like, go right to that extreme sort of death, chaos, and it's to come back from the for history here. It's like the Athenians and the Melanesian dialogue. It's we do what we do because we have the power to do it, and you must. There's a specific line, and I'm going to forget it now that I'm trying to say it, but it's the conqueror's. He believes that he has the conqueror's right to do whatever he wants, and the conqueror's right at this point is him to settle his grudges. And it's not even grudges; it's grudges against a perceived people.
Mm-hmm.
It's
almost the others don't get to choose.
Yes, yeah, and I will not go into the council yet because I think the council needs to be. I have many things to say about the council, but he's stereotypical bloodthirsty soldier is what he is, and I don't know. I'm of two minds. Either yes, he broke when Missandre died, which that's what it is, or he was super simplified into bloodthirsty soldier because that's what the screenwriters needed. And
Por qué no los dos?
Yeah, I guess, but I don't know. He goes the way of Jon in terms of he's no longer a character. He's a one-dimensional little picket to throw at somebody. Amanda?
There is a moment between Grey Worm and Jon before Grey Worm starts, basically slaughtering those Lannister prisoners, where when Jon goes to try to stop him, and Grey Worm's, all of his soldiers, they point their spears at him, like, and not just in a, hey, don't do that. I thought it was a pretty threatening, like, I think Grey Worm would have killed him, honestly, there.
Oh, yeah.
And I do wonder, that would have been awful, but I do wonder what the immediate after effect of that would have been. Would Dany have been upset? Would she have justified it because she's gone nuts? Like, that, Jon is still the only person that we see Jon get through to her. Like, her face changes back from that crazed look to like the odd girl with big plans for a moment. Like, Jon still gets through to her. She cares about him. And I wonder what would have happened if Grey Worm had done that, or if he had just injured him, what would have happened there? Like, he didn't think once about the consequences of, hey, this is an ally. This is someone that my queen actually likes. Like, no, this is my job. You're going to stop me. I'm going to kill you.
Grey Worm doesn't have allies. He has a queen. That's it.
I'm wondering if this is a simplification of a conspiracy or of a mutiny. If in the book, when it actually gets written, there's obviously maybe a deeper plot line, which is that these two separate armies or groups of people go to King's Landing. The ones who sailed over the sea with Dany and the ones who are from Winterfell, from the north. And they're pretty much like oil and water. And I feel like there's probably a backstory in there somewhere that they could have been built up to explain that there was some tension between these two groups already. Like they already don't trust one another. And I'm sure the northern people probably feel like the Unsullied are good soldiers, but they probably don't trust them because they're, vicious murderers who kill
Stormtroopers.
babies.
Yeah, they're stormtroopers.
Gonna count that as reference number 2. We got a Star Wars reference in there. Anyway, that's all I got. Are we going to Nick, or did Nick drop out?
No, I'm here. I didn't really have anything else on that particular point. Did you want me to keep going with a different one?
Yeah, no, it's your turn.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I also had the comment. I think Steven mentioned it a little bit as well with the symbology of the Dany standing there with the big wings unfurling behind her. Was the next scene that I had a bunch of notes on, and I just wrote down Nazi speech throughout the whole thing. Just gonna call a spade a spade. That whole scene, Dany we haven't seen her since everything went sideways, and so I was really watching her face to try and gauge her expressions. And several times she just seemed really high on her own supply. Like she's just enthralled, detached from the horror she just dealt to everybody, and instead is just, this is great. I'm loving where I am right now. Everything's good. The fact that she massacred, a million people isn't even on her periphery. And the scenery is just, I'm in front of a crowd. I've got angry hate speech, liberating the peoples. And she names everywhere. She talks about Winterfell. We're going all the way down to Dorne, this entire continent, and then the world. Again, that's very, familiar speech for realistic world politics, circa 1939. So the whole thing just rang very heavily with fascism for me. And for people who are aware or are able to point that out, it stands out like a sore thumb. I think to everybody else who was in that particular moment, all the other characters, the Dothraki, who again are still in mass somehow around, and all of the Unsullied who are standing out in front, it's just got this theme of, yeah, we're with you 100%, and it was very scary. Tyler.
So before I touch on that scene, I want to kind of go back and just kind of quickly point out a few minor things too before that. Tyrion sure gets himself to the Red Keep very quickly there before everyone else. Jaime and Cersei's final resting place is shown. It's a little shallow there. You would think if they just moved a little bit further away, or maybe covered their heads a little bit, they could have avoided the bricks that eventually fell on them and killed them.
Hide under the dragon skull is what I thought.
That too, yeah. And then
A good case for why safety PPE should always be worn.
exactly.
Get out of here.
Boo!
And then Arya is back in the city, sees Jon walking through the magical Dothraki army that has magically reappeared in the city there. When we were told that was the end of the Dothraki after the Battle of Winterfell on the inside of the episode. But I mean, apparently that was wrong.
Holy SHIT Batman. Like that, it didn't make any sense if you're following scale of army. It's just
I also got to throw out there, I put a note in here, is right before that scene, we had also seen, with Jon at least, that was his confrontation with Grey Worm, and he storms off as if to go talk to Dany right away, and comes across this, where Grey Worm is up there and has all the troops, like, did he go somewhere else for a while? Like,
I had the same
Went
thought.
back to-
That was my same
He
thought
went back
too.
to Winterfell and came back, actually, is what he did.
I completely missed that they were,
Grey Worm beats him
walking
there.
into magic doors.
So
Sorry.
onto that scene here, like I'm not somebody who always picks up a lot of very symbolic things here, but this thing was like just beating me over the head of like, this is very evil, and then like you suggested there too, Nick, this is very much like also here too, Dany also lands the dragon and dismounts it very quickly to get up there for her speech and stuff like that, so she can have that cool shot of the wings opening. But this is definitely like a very reminiscence of Nazi Germany there, pretty much. You've got the banner draped along the side of the castle there. You've got all of the army out there listening to her, cheering and hooting and hollering along and stuff like that. And this is maybe more of a question for, I guess I don't know. Does she switch back and forth between Dothraki and Valerian when she's talking to the different army there? I would assume
I
Yes.
so.
had the same thought. I think so, yeah.
I think
She does.
she changes based on who she's addressing.
That was my
Perhaps,
thought
like-
too, because I was like, well, the Dothraki don't understand Valerian, and then the Unsullied probably definitely don't understand Dothraki, because nobody really understands Dothraki unless you've lived with them. So I just wanted to bring that up. Also, and to my final point here before I turn it over for the rest of you guys to add your little points here. Anyone ever notice how Dany continually gets more and more braids in her hair, kind of reflective of the battles that she won, aka the Dothraki way? Go ahead now, and Steven, I succeed some time to you now.
Yeah, I think it's a very disturbing scene. They come upon it, and it's she is giving her monologue to her great soldiers who have defeated the enemy, and the Dothraki, you have killed the kills, and my greatest general war hero, you shall be my standard bearer in the wars to come, and we shall free them from the west to the east, and blah 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 blah. And it is notable who, and they even say it in there, who she's not actually interacting with, and that's any of the liberated. She is talking to the quote unquote liberators. None of the liberated are there, and that's because the liberated are all dying or dead in houses that she burnt down. And I think is it Tyrion or is it Jon? I think it's Tyrion that walks up to her and says, have you even gone down onto the streets to look and what's happening? Like, have you even talked to someone from here? You call yourself a liberator. What's going on around you? And she just does not take it well. And that's because she is in this I honestly think she does believe what she is saying, but she's a cult leader, and cult leaders believe their own thing. She's also a straight up fascist. She knows no rule but military rule, and that rule is subject to one person's whim. And it goes right down to, it's a cult of personality, fascism. It's Mussolini, it's Hitler, and it's I almost wish that the show hadn't done this, because we hadn't had any like explicit, ideologies in here. It's all been just like kind of modeled together chaos sort of stuff. And this idea of just her being just straight up fascist is kind of out of left.
You need an evolution of that.
It's just kind of out of left field for me. I am not a Dany lover, as anyone who has listened to any episode ever will know. I do not like Dany. Yeah, Steven's favorite character. I hate Dany, in fact, and this is still weird. I think it's heavy-handed for the audience's sake. I think that they are trying to get across, oh, she is evil. You know how we're going to make her look evil? We're going to make her look like a Nazi. And they get it across, but whatever. I get it's a weird scene. It's a horrifying scene, and I unfortunately think there were an okay amount of people out there that watch that scene and go, "Oh, that's so cool," instead of going, "Oh, that's terrifying." So, Nick.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a progression in there that, again, like we said, that would be nice if this episode were several episodes where we can see more of that. But she goes from, we will, like I said in the last recording, when Tyrion asks about if they ring the bells, give them that chance to surrender, and she never says yes, but she just sort of like nods, like an acknowledgement to, we will think about it, more or less. Two, in this scene, we will liberate everybody, whether they want it or not. And it's this like off the deep end, but almost so far into the deep end that it's unrealistic. So I agree with Stephen with your point there. I originally raised my finger talking about the different languages that she has. Yeah, she switches back and forth from addressing the Dothraki to addressing the Unsullied. And again, Jon and Tyrion don't know those languages. Like famously in the last episode, Tyrion stumbles trying to save Valyrian. And when Jon and Tyrion talk about it later, Tyrion says, "Did you hear how she was talking to her folks, her people? Does it sound like she's done fighting?" Like they still had no idea in that interchange what she was saying. And again, just because we're making this reference, if you go back and you watch things from historical perspectives, watching Hitler speaking, like even if you don't know German, the way he speaks is very aggressive, very rough. I mean, German is not necessarily a romance language, but the way that it's done, very guttural and loud and hard, was exactly how she was speaking in the tone she was using. So I think to kind of how we mentioned Jon and Tyrion maybe stand-ins meant to be for the audience, we get this kind of shock and awe, scared feeling just hearing that speech, not knowing what she's saying. I was reading the subtitles when she was speaking in those different languages. It would be interesting to go back and turn off the subtitle. Like you can't turn them off. I think they're meant there because she's speaking a different language. But to not try and read it and just like watch her characteristics and her mannerisms of how she's speaking and see the anger in her face when she says those things. And yeah, I mean, I would wager some of that was probably shot for shot what they were trying to get across from some historical footage. I wouldn't be surprised if they said they pulled some of that from there. Amanda?
I'm gonna cut in front of Amanda because I actually am, and Nick is a poopy face.
On my screen, I can see she's got one finger. It might just be my weird screen that I don't see the other one.
No,
Cutting
it's
back
Gary's
to
turn. Go ahead.
previous conversation about Jaime and Cersei, just to quickly touch on that, and that was that in the intro, I actually saw the two actors' names, and I was like, why the hell are these actors' names in the intro? Because they're dead. And then it's realization that they're like dead bodies or mannequins of them, honestly, appeared in the show for like 3 seconds, and they got
it was them laying there.
full acting credit for the episode. They were actually, I think, like 1 and 2 actors after the title, and I was just like, they literally show up for 3 seconds of the episode, and I was like, that is crazy. Also going to the point we were more recently talking about, which is the speech and Dothraki. Tyler mentioned it, that like the scale of armies is super unrealistic. Like it was huge, like rows upon rows, and like I don't know, platoons, like groups of soldiers in squares to make
Companies.
whatever Steven says, to make reference of scale of the army, and very much, do some symbolism to Nazi Germany and oppressive fascism. And also the dragon banner. I was very, very caught by this like 2-story tall dragon banner that there's no logistical reason you would have that flying into battle. Like it's not like a flag someone would carry as their whatever it's called, the flag bearers. Like it's 2 effing stories tall. Like it is
like
not a
a
realistic
sail to me. Like
that would make sense. Thank you.
I was going to say
that
the same thing.
I mean,
I
don't know
thought they'd
if
taken it off one of the boats.
Yeah, I mean,
but they don't have any
it's
boats.
right, and I don't know how it's draped.
Do they not though? Do they not?
Stephen and I have
This is
had
true. We've already
extensive
covered that
discussions
they're
about the
they're
boats that pop
military.
into and out of existence. You know, who knows? But
What
I mean, I
What
don't.
about
I'm
Second
thinking.
Fleet?
Oh, there you go. We haven't had Second Fleet yet.
Exactly.
My last note was, and Nick made a quick point about the way Nick was talking, the way the languages were conveyed, and it's very guttural. Is it maybe also when those languages are built, like in the beginning of the show, they're meant to be very militaristic and very warmongery? Like they are by nature very not very pleasant languages to hear on screen for the audience, who probably, in this case, mostly speaks English. So
I real quick, I'm going to disagree with that and say High Valyrian strikes me as something that would be closer to a Romance language, while Dothraki would probably be something more guttural, and like.
fair enough. I guess Valerian is a little more romantic, but yeah, just like yeah, very heavy, and that was also very, very heavy-handed. Like that whole like 20 minutes, heavy-handed dragon wigs, heavy-handed fascism references. It was just, gross. Sorry, Amanda. I will succeed the remainder of my time to you.
I mean, they do mention with the Dothraki language that they didn't have like what did they not have a word for? It wasn't love, it was something else. But they had multiple words for like kill and war and stuff like that. So that could be a thing. I did have some notes about this that are a little more lighthearted. In terms of safety, Jon walking through the horses from behind and pushing them around. Does this seem very safe? I don't know about you, but I would never walk up behind a horse and just push it out of the way. I just feel like Jon's lucky to not have gotten kicked by a horse.
Don't tell me how to live my life
Also,
with horses.
they're holding their swords in the air, and he's just shoving this. They've just slaughtered a city, and he is just shoving a horse out of the way, like they're not gonna take their sword down at him in a heartbeat. Like that was very unsafe. But Dany just calmly walking in and surveying the area of smoking ruins in front of her. Not a word, not a thing. Like you say, she even looks pleased. She looks pretty happy. But I did note, I really hope she can project her voice from up there, because she wasn't even standing like in front of them. She was standing at the top of a very tall staircase. And I mean, it's shown a few other examples before of her apparently addressing a huge crowd, but I don't realistically see her voice projecting that loud. That might just be some movie magic. The book even makes a couple
disbelief on that.
Definitely. The book even makes a couple mentions of actually Robert Baratheon's voice. As a war commander, you need a good voice, because it's not like you've got a bullhorn or walkie-talkies to communicate with everyone. And Robert Baratheon had an amazing like field commander voice to grab everyone. Dany's going to need that. If you're going to choose to speak to someone, gosh, if I'm 30 feet away from you and speak, I have to practically yell for someone to understand exactly what I'm saying. She must have amazing enunciation for everyone to hear her up there. I had a different thought originally, but we went through so many little tangents before it got to me that I completely forgot it. So if I think of that little gem, I will be sure to tell you. But we can move on. Oh, I remember another one of it. One more thing was, well, I guess we're probably going to talk about this a little more, but she does mention to Jon later on that Cersei used, like, I think he tells her about the children that they burned, and she said that Cersei used their innocence as a weapon against me.
Uh-huh.
And I just wanted to throw out there, yeah, she did use it as a weapon against you, and you took that as a weapon, dealt with it as a weapon, didn't even acknowledge the horror of that. Right. You blamed Cersei as if you had nothing to do with it, as if your choices meant nothing.
I think that gets back into as well the idea of just the hyper soldierism of, well, they're hiding behind civilians, so I mean we should be able to just kill the civilians, and that's, in war you have to take all proper necessary precautions not to kill unarmed combatants.
Yeah, just because your enemy does something atrocious doesn't mean that you're weak if you don't acknowledge those. If you acknowledge those scary things, it's yeah. There's the fact that she talks about it in such a way that like she thought I was weak, that I wouldn't attack through the children, but I did anyway. So that makes me strong. It's like no.
She built 4 orphanages in front of me, and I burnt every single one of them.
Yeah, it's like take that. Checkmate. No, it's like you hurdled the point and completely missed what we were talking about.
But that's worse. You see how that's worse,
you
right?
You see how that's worse. Well, she thought I would stop at murdering children. Well, she was wrong.
Exactly. You underestimate me yet again.
You underestimate my power.
Exactly.
Just to throw another Star Wars reference out there, we've gotten a couple of good ones in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a couple instances in this episode where people pointed out the horrible things that Dany did, and she just glasses right over the whole point of how horrible it was. It's like, yeah, but I won. You murdered a city, but I won. And it's just the ends justify the means, no matter how horrible it is. So.
Yeah, Tyrion even mentions that. He's like, yeah, I freed my brother, and you slaughtered a city. Like, let's
Exactly.
compare crimes here.
Mm-hmm.
I had a note on that particular line too, since that was good that you brought it up, where I was trying to read Dany's emotions through most of this episode because I wanted to see where her mentality was at. Obviously, after the speech, it's like, okay, so she's full on deep end. But when Tyrion says that line to her, she almost looks confused. Like in her mind, I wrote down, she doesn't even realize that's what this could be perceived as. In her mind, she fought and she won against Cersei. Like the framing of the word to say you slaughtered a city is not even something she had realized she did or could be seen as what she did. That's how I read it anyways.
That's interesting. I could see that, and it makes a little more sense, albeit in a pretty twisted.
It's a very
Frame of
twisted way,
mind.
right? It's like you ran over 5 people and pushed
Yeah.
a car in the ditch, but I got here on time. It's like you don't even realize that you did that as well in doing what you did. Steven?
Are we skipping Gary on purpose? I honestly can't tell if you're doing it to be rude or not.
Okay, I'm
Gary, you gotta raise
gonna
your
make
right
my
hand.
terrible
My
terrible
screen, I
point.
can't see you doing that.
My terrible point of defending both Dany and Grey Worm, in that is that military, crap, I forgot the name for it. War criminals are determined by the victors.
That's not true. It's not a true
History
statement.
is determined by the victors.
History is determined by the victors.
Is that what
But
you're trying to say?
also, war.
Yes.
Yes, but to make one step further, history is written by the victors, but also after the war criminals are determined by the victors.
I would say
Because
that's not true.
Grey Worm considered every Lannister soldier to be created atrocities of their own. I'm losing my words. I'm gonna pass it to Steven.
An
That was my terrible thought of the
overgeneralization.
day.
What?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. I was just going to say, I was actually, talking about all this is just making me think about maybe an anti-historical here, that Dany doesn't seem to really understand what she's done. She is completely deluded, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where the source of that delusion is. And we've talked about how she has no friends. She has worshippers. But she had advisors that generally told her the truth. Were her advisors not upfront enough with her? Because she had Tyrion, she had Jon, she had the Onion Knight, who's Davos. She had Varys for a while. She had all these people very much willing to tell her you're doing the wrong thing, and she still goes off the deep end.
Davos was Jon's, but yes, I would say the others.
Well, anyways, it's the idea that is this just it was just Targaryen madness, and there was going to be no stopping it regardless of anything, or was she to an extent let down by her advisors, and her advisors like Jon Snow didn't push back hard enough? Someone go.
Amanda, you go. You were before me.
With the advisor thing, Sansa makes that comment about when Tyrion's like, "Oh, well, we advise her," and she says something like, "Oh, you're afraid of her." Like, Tyrion did, to his credit, usually argue for what he believed in. I don't think he went as far as he could have in arguing for it. And I think he said things he would like. I don't think he would have necessarily turned in Varys if he wasn't scared of Dany. But he did generally say or like tell her the truth. But the rest of her advisors, the same thing. Like, they're scared of her at that point. They are telling her the truth, but not enough of it, like she's not getting very good advice. She's not getting as good of advice as she could possibly, since she wants to hear one thing and one thing only. Go ahead, Tyler.
I could also kind of attribute this to the two things of like absolute power corrupts absolutely, and also she has bought into her own hype to the point where that her mission was always freeing, you know, the people oppressed, breaking the wheel and everything like that, where now she is taking it to the extreme of I am going to liberate everybody because that is my grand purpose in life here, is to liberate everyone. And I want to call out a couple of points Tyrion mentions in the conversation he has with Jon there. Everywhere she goes, evil men die. And I think it's probably supposed to be air quotes around the word evil men. Sorry, this is also from a little later on when Jon and Dany are talking. Then it's like, I know what is good. She mentions to Jon, you've always known what's good, and they don't get to choose. So she is kind of, I think, fully bought into this Misa, or I wouldn't say Messiah, but I go with Misa prophecy that she is going to liberate everyone from oppression, break the wheel, and raise everybody up in her grand image and vision. Nick.
It's the, the next step up, or the escalation concern, right? It's not like we're going to free the free peoples who are slaves. And some of that liberation, where that term kind of starts from, is true because she's in Slaver's Bay. But then it becomes, we're going to free the people who are oppressed by this tyrant in King's Landing. And it's not so much about us versus fighting an army and I have a single focused person. It's I'm going to attack and slaughter the whole city. But then the escalation beyond that is where that's always been her goal since we are introduced to her in season 1, episode 1. It's not the Iron Throne. It's we're going to spread out our quote unquote version of what's good and liberate people across the whole world. And that's where the escalation is clearly like, this is not going to end until she perceives she's done everything she needs to. And her speech there highlights that it's going to involve the whole world, which is where this, I think Steven said, this whole persona of the strong person comes from, which tends to borderline on fascism. And it's this push into everyone who they perceive can't make that choice or shouldn't make that choice on their own. Only Jon and her can, in her words. And yeah, it's scary.
I think, and one last thing I was even thinking of was just that up until even when these people are going to jail and they're going to be sentenced to death, no one outright disagrees with her. There's not a single person, even Tyrion. The closest Tyrion comes to outright disagreeing was, you committed treason. You burnt a city. He doesn't stand there and go, fucking look at yourself. Look at what you've done. Look at what you're doing. You don't have a single person. There's no debate. There's no fight. They give up. They don't even try to do it. And I would say Jon is probably the worst about that. Jon has zero ability to call her out on anything. And I'm even up until the very final moment, and that we'll talk about later. He has no ability to say no to her or to disrupt her delusions of grandiose fantasy with reality. Tyrion, who is the one who I would expect to do it, won't do it either. The closest he will come, oh, well, my queen, what you have to understand is blah, 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 and does not actually go up and say, no, you're wrong. No one tells her she's wrong. And that is, I think, one of the key things is I can't remember the last time someone really strongly told her she was wrong. Even Varys, when he was being burnt at the stake, I hope I'm wrong. That is how he goes. Amanda.
I gotta really disagree with you there, because Jon literally was arguing with her. Granted, this is before he bent the knee. Most of it, at least. He does speak to her, and that was the same thing in this episode. He went to her when he didn't agree. She wanted his back or his backup a little bit ago in Winterfell about something, and he was like, "We need every man we can get." Like, I do think Jon speaks the truth here. I do think he is a little too dutiful of a, this is the queen, I will obey her rules, but he does tell her what he thinks, more so honestly than I think Tyrion does. Tyrion would argue it, but Tyrion would try to change his argument in a way that he thought she would actually receive it, which is probably smart, but Jon's truth was more honest, even if he wouldn't argue it as hard.
And I would say she is too dense to be able to receive it.
Yeah, absolutely, but I just can't agree with the idea that Jon was unable to tell
Okay.
her no. That's just way too far for me.
Agree to disagree.
All right. Let's see. Do we want to just kind of? I guess I think we're basically just kind of at the point where we're just going through scene by scene with the episode. Do we just want to kind of keep going with that as a group here? Because there's a lot to talk about here, and I think we're probably going to nitpick at every part of the episode here. Really.
You guys talked about the Tyrion Jon conversation.
Yeah, I had one more note on that too after Gary.
Have we talked about that?
Okay.
Sorry, I was out for just a little bit taking my.
I think the Tyrion Jon conversation is before the murder, correct?
Yeah. So
There's
that's
one
that's
before,
where I was
one
going to have
after.
us pick up there. Basically, was that conversation there?
Okay. So, like, maybe you guys didn't miss it then, but holy crap, there's a singular line in that exchange that I didn't catch before, where Tyrion admits that Tyrion admits that he loves Dany. And I go, huh? Like, Jon's in love with Dany, everyone's in love with Dany, but Tyrion admits, like, I was in love with her too. And I was like, that kind of came out of left field. Like, I feel like that's got to be explained more in the expanded lore that, you know, Tyrion falls in love with Dany, and that's why he's also a mindless drone, is because he's actually in love with Dany. Tyler?
Yeah, I was going to say I vaguely remember that from the first time I watched it too, but it still kind of weirdly stands out to me because it's just like, I mean, it kind of makes that scene on the boat make a little bit more sense where he was standing outside on the ship there watching Jon go into her room and kind of having that weird look on his face. It somewhat makes that make a little bit more sense. And I don't know if his love was like a relationship type love, or he loves the idea of who he thought she was going to be. They're not necessarily like in love with her, but in love with the person he thought she was going to be there. Go ahead, Nick.
I saw that more as infatuation, where not necessarily unrequited love, but more so that he, like you said, had a thought that who he thought she was going to be and the person that she could become or was going to become. But then he felt even more betrayed when she turned out to be, you know, the exact opposite.
Yeah, so the infatuation, I kind of get that point there too, of like he wasn't really in love with her. It was just more of like, again, the idea of who she could have been.
Yeah, and love for a king or queen is quite often expressed in a lot of different things of like, oh, you love your queen. You're not saying you're in love with them. It's more of like just that the love you have for your country, it kind of transfers to the idea of the king or queen who leads them. That's how I took it, but I honestly completely forgot about that line until you guys mentioned it. Like, I can't even remember the sentence.
I caught that as a different statement than like love or loyalty to the queen and belief in her solution. It was that he was actually in love with her. Nick?
I believe Tyrion says, "You love her, don't you?" And Jon, who we've seen him kind of recoil from the physical touch of Dany, sits down and says, like, he doesn't acknowledge he didn't. He just kind of is quiet about it. And Tyrion says, "I love her too." Like, not past tense. I think it's "I love her too." And he said, not as successfully as you, obviously, or something to that extent. Because I'd written down a note about the successfully part. But yeah, it was odd that he kind of came out and said that at the end. But I think that's why he's trying to coax Jon into doing the deed, saying that like even though we care about her, we have to do this terrible thing. And that's why Jon then follows up with love is the death of duty, because he talks about how it's hard to do what you perceive as the right thing to do, the duty part of it, when you love somebody.
As a fun thing there, I did laugh that Tyrion had to pause at that point and be like, damn, that was a good line. Did you just make that up?
Mm-hmm.
Did you just come up with that? And he had to tell them that Maester Aemon came up with it. And I kind of want to know Tyrion's next thought of like, that would have been cooler if you made it up right there or what.
I also, the fact that he quoted Maester Aemon, at the point where he was told by Maester Aemon, he didn't realize Maester Aemon was actually his uncle or something.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It would have been something like that.
Great uncle or something.
Just
Great uncle.
great uncle, something like that. Tyler?
Pull a family tree out.
I don't know if you guys talked about this or too. Did you get to back it up? Sorry, just a little bit further. Was Arya standing next to Jon all of a sudden? Did you guys cover that a little bit there?
We
No.
talked initially how she just magically appeared at the top of the steps in front of the army, but we didn't talk about their interaction much.
I was just gonna
Ninja vanish.
I was just gonna kind of point out that it's just amazing how she magically shows up next to Jon all of a sudden when like the army is walking down the stairs, but then also
Everyone else has fast travel. Arya has insta travel.
Yes, but then also she
does the Skyrim crouch and sneak and just disappears from everybody else's radar.
There we go. But also too, I was just gonna call out the dumb line that she says, "I know a killer when I see one." It's like, what?
Okay, yes, I agree. I was like, what? There is so much more that Arya could have said there, or so much better lines.
That line would have had a lot more weight if she had said that when she first saw her. It's like, have you been more keen since the last time you saw her? Just, again, time travel aside, from the last time you saw her up at Winterfell, like if she had said that right away after her experiences in Braavos, where she first saw Dany ride in with her procession into Winterfell, and then she said, I know a killer when I see one, that would have a lot more weight now, because it's like, well, I kind of told you so. Whereas they've always just kind of had a hunch, her and Sansa, and now it's kind of confirmed. But her saying it now is defeatist, because it's like, well, clearly everyone, even the people in the streets who never knew Dany, know that she's a killer, because we just saw what she did.
If
I mean,
you
it's like,
want to...
Yeah, Arya standing next to her going, I think she may burn down a city, with the city smoking behind her. You think?
A soldier walks in and is very soldiery, and you're like, I know a soldier when I see one. No duh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and especially with Arya's other lines, it wasn't necessarily. I thought it was kind of a weird one for her too.
A better line would have been something where it highlighted where she was more of the mind of Tyrion, to just say, you know what you need to do, Jon. Or something like, this has to be you. Or I came, because also I highlighted too how Jon didn't even know she was in the city. The last time Jon sees Arya, she's in Winterfell. She snuck out with the Hound and came down here, and she's like, I came down here to kill Cersei. Because at first Jon turns to her and he's like, oh my gosh, Arya, what are you doing here? And I was like, well, she's down there because, she came down with the army. And I was like, oh wait, no, she didn't. Like, Jon had no idea that she was down there, so it's even more random that she just happens to be standing next to him at the end of that exchange. Gary.
You're muted, Gary.
Oh, I was unmuted and then I muted myself. Adding to my general disappointment with Arya in the last episode, I don't really feel like she really added much to this episode. She didn't really say anything inspirational. Spoiler alert, she literally just tells the plot of her ending of her story arc, just speaks it aloud, and then she talks to Jon for 5 seconds. That's her entire fucking existence in this episode. Tyler.
I will agree. There was definitely a couple of points throughout this episode. I'm like, the thought of Gary came into my head of like, this really doesn't even need to be here. What is the purpose of this scene here? What is the purpose of this character? So I too have been infected by Gary throughout the course of this podcast.
Don't do it.
There's a tiny little Gary living in each of our minds when we watch this show.
It's like herpes. Once you get it, it's tough to get rid of.
God dang it, Gary.
In order to get rid of it, you got to get a certain herbicide and a little brush in order to get rid of the Gary.
Back a little to the conversation with John and Tyrion there. John, at the same time he's talking with Tyrion there, he's trying to kind of rationalize to himself while talking to Tyrion about, like, okay, what she did was understandable there. Like, she had to do this and stuff like that. And it's like John's, I think, John is struggling with what he saw versus what he feels should have happened there.
Sorry, I had a thought with that scene too. When John is contemplating doing the deed, I thought at first, well, in his mind, he has an allegiance to her as queen, but it's almost more so this thought of, like, he cares about her, he loves her, he doesn't want to end her life. He showed more willingness to take out somebody, in the sense of a willingness to take out somebody with when he came back resurrected from the dead with the other, like, Alistair Thorne people, and Ollie is the little boy's name, and showed a willingness to do that rather than taking out Daenerys, when clearly Daenerys is the much bigger threat than even as horrible Alistair Thorne or Ollie were, as being, detrimental to the Night's Watch. But he has this, like, allegiance to them, or wants to do the right thing. Like, even when he's under Alistair Thorne and he's just a nobody before he becomes Lord Commander in the Night's Watch, he says, I'm going to do whatever he asked me to do, or I'm going to, it's his choice. It's whatever they want to do as the leaders of that group. So there's this oath and fealty. There's the word I keep trying to think of. There's a fealty to what he wants to do with his character. But with Dany, it's almost like the stakes are so much higher. He almost has this ineptitude to try and get it done. You looking for your big word sign, Gary? I gotcha. I know it's coming. It's almost inept. You can't find your big word sign when I say ineptitude.
So, John ends the conversation with Tyrion basically like, that's her decision. She is the queen, when Tyrion is like, well, she'll kill you because you have the better claim to the throne there and stuff like that. And I'm kind of curious here of, like, when do we think John changes his mind about what he has to do? When does he come to terms with he needs to do that there? Before I go over to Nick, though, because I'm assuming we're going to jump into the next scene there, I do want to kind of call out there that Dany does finally get the ability to reach out and touch the Iron Throne, like what she has had visions and dreams of for so long. She finally achieves that. It would have been kind of cool had she sat down in it for a brief moment, but I digress. All right, Nick, when did that pivotal moment come?
His face changes. I was watching Dany's face, so I was naturally watching everybody else's reactions. His face changes when they're talking about, well, we get to decide what's good or bad. You've always known what's good or bad. And he says, what about the people who also think they know what's good? And Dany says, they don't get to choose. That determination right there is when his face changes and his jaw kind of drops, and he realizes she is evil and something has to be done. And yeah, he ends it there. That's my take. I'll let Amanda say what she thinks on that sentence, and then I'll come back to your comment you had at the end there, Tyler.
Sorry, helps to unmute. I had written a little note that as John's like going to find Dany, apparently he magically knows where she is. They magically know their way around a castle that I assume would take weeks to learn your way around, but I mean, maybe it's easier with half of it in rubble. But he Drogon was just taking a little snooze under the snow.
Yeah.
First of all, thought they did a pretty good job of the special effects there. Just the snow. I always think snow in movies tends to look pretty fake, or maybe that's just because when I'm out in snow, I'm actually wearing stuff that you would wear in snow and not like them. But like the snow falling off him was just kind of a cute little thing. But Drogon like sniffs John and like lets him go. I wondered, like, if John had meant in this moment to do something, would Drogon have been able to tell? Like, Drogon's got some powers of
There's
knowing
some
what.
sort of dragon kinship going on there too.
Yeah, like I mean, he seems very much the guard there, and I think if he, this is a complete guess on my part, it feels like if Jon was a threat right then Drogon would have been like, lunch. But he lets Jon go, and I believe in that moment that Jon's mind wasn't made up. Like, he was going to confront Dany, and he did. He immediately, like, she was talking about how she was a little girl, and her face is back in this odd. She almost touches the throne. It's actually a really touching scene, and you're seeing that scene from the House of the Undying so many seasons and years ago. And Jon immediately is like, they are slaughtering prisoners in the streets. Like, and her face is shocked because not because of what he says, but that he's sullying their time with this. And she's like, well, that obviously had to happen. Duh. Though I did have to also note, she should really not be alone in a city that was literally conquered like 20 minutes ago. You don't know what random survivors are hiding beneath piles of rubble. You have a very realistic but slightly undignified way to go from a random soldier who just pokes out the teensiest little rusted sword from behind a wall and knocks you down. I got a couple more thoughts, Gary. Hold on. She did actually, I feel like, got affected by Jon's voice for a moment. Like, she did try to, like, she wants his approval. I think he's still the only person that can get through to her. And then one last note before we go more. She's so enamored of the throne right there. I do wonder if she's thinking that she'll need to rebuild the room it's in, or if the throne. Go ahead, Gary.
Again, Gary, you flipped the mute.
Ah, damn it. Sorry. I'm gonna save a conspiracy theory till after this general conversation. But also going back to Dany's general feeling about seeing the Iron Throne for the first time, I do feel like that should have been a really powerful moment. But they just let her, like, they wasted it. Like, they could have made that so much better, and they didn't. That was one point. The second point was, she says that it was described to her as a mountain of swords, and all I could think was, like, I'm pretty sure that was the number one critique back to season 1 of the Iron Throne, was that it was supposed to be a mountain of swords. So I thought it was probably of all the, like, tongue-in-cheek references, probably the best in a long while, where they actually had a character say it was supposed to be a mountain of swords, not like a little chair. But that was all I had. I thought that the description of the chair and that Dany should have had a much more poignant moment. Nick.
There's several bits in the history of the World of Ice and Fire where people believed superstitiously that if you weren't supposed to be the king, the chair would, like, cut you, or like that you would get ill from sitting in the chair. And when she reaches out and finally touches it, there was a part of me that wondered if she was going to, like, recoil, or, like, like, the fact that she didn't sit in it on when I first saw it, I was in the same mindset. Like, the whole point is that who sat the Iron Throne, and she never actually sits her butt in it. But on a rewatch, I almost kind of thought, maybe me putting my own spin on it, it's because she's not meant to be queen that she doesn't sit in it. Like, she's not worthy of it. My own thoughts, not that they were trying to go for that. I just think that that's, well, I don't know. I think that there's something there too, because she's so enamored by it. It's like the unattainable thing. No matter how much she thinks this is what I want, I finally have it, she's distracted from it. Like, I would turn and sit in the thing and have my conversation with Jon from the place I've worked so hard to get to. But she is detracted from that because she still feels so much that Jon is going to be her equal and he's going to come along with me. In the comment that you had, Amanda, you're absolutely right. She doesn't get mad at Jon because Jon says people are dying in the streets. She's mad at Jon that Jon's not up on her level, thinking this is glorious. We've won. Everything we want is perfect now. She's mad that Jon is somehow angry. Why John sad face? Right? It's this totally distorted view of what the world is actually doing right now and how people are grieving. Yeah, it's there's a lot going on in that scene, and it's clear between the two of them they're in two totally different places. And I don't think John goes in there thinking he's going to stab her. Tyler, my last point, you had a comment about John and Drogon doesn't necessarily perceive John as a threat, maybe. Amanda, but even at the end, like when Dany's laying there with the murder weapon sticking out of her chest, he still just is like, John's the only other living person in this room. Curse you, chair! You know, it's like he doesn't necessarily think that John is still the bad person. I think that there is some sort of relational, not in a weird sense, but like a sixth sense kind of thing between Drogon as a dragon perceiving John is the rightful heir, for whatever that means. That would be a time to hold up your I'm overthinking it, John. Sign there, Gary. Amanda.
I didn't consider the relationship between Drogon and John. I did write down about, like, I remember when this first came out, there was a ton on the internet about Drogon seeing pointy thing and destroying other pointy thing. And while hilarious and they were funny, they made me laugh. I just think Drogon is so much smarter than that. They say that, they make many references to that. Also, Drogon knows what a blade is. He knows what a threat is. He has enough connection to Dany to know what she was after, and I think that it ended up destroying everything. But I still didn't quite understand why he didn't go after John. This dragon has literally snatched little girls up off the plane and eaten them. But maybe your comment, Nick, makes more sense. Like, he does have some kind of relationship, or it could also still be the Dany connection. Like, Dany cared for John, so Drogon can't just, in his mind, it's not quite the same thing of like, oh, I'm mad at you. But he also might, in the same way that he didn't, if he sensed that John wasn't going to do anything originally, hadn't made up his mind to, John is grieving here. He's in mourning here. He's not like, yes, I killed the bad person. Maybe they're grieving together. Or maybe I'm wrong and Drogon saw a pointy thing and destroyed other pointy thing. Go ahead, Tyler.
To kind of touch on that point a little bit before I go to my next kind of point I wanted to talk about, there was also the talk about how dragons recognize Targaryen bloodlines, or those with Targaryen bloods, and probably would not harm them. That maybe explains why Jon was able to pass through, because the Targaryen bloodline, and then why he wasn't attacked. You could hand wave that away with the Targaryen bloodline theory or whatever, but just kind of a random thought that I wanted to bring out there. And then I wanted to ask the group here this question, if anyone picked up on this here, and I did not until this rewatch. Right before Jon stabs Daenerys, he says, "You were my queen now and always." Keyword is were.
Oh, I didn't.
I did
Yeah,
not
I
pick up
did.
on that until like this rewatch. We're like, oh, holy crap, and then stab. So I was just kind of curious, did anyone else pick up on that?
I did, and I had about 2 seconds of being like, oh, he already knew? Still weird. And then I kind of forgot about it and didn't even note it down. But yeah, you're right. He said it, like, if she was suspicious at all, that would have been a giveaway. Not that she would have had much time to do anything about it.
I did not catch that at all. Even
Neither
thinking
did I.
about it right now, I thought he said, "You are my queen."
That's
now
what I
and
thought
always.
as well.
The
Past tense
Mandela
is very
effect.
telling.
You're up, Steven.
All right. So what was I going to say now? That kind of threw me for a loop. About Drogon. I was wondering, maybe one of the reasons that Drogon didn't attack afterwards wasn't because, pointy thing and destroy the other pointy thing or whatnot, but maybe it was I do believe, based on what has been shown in the show, they have some sort of mental connection to Daenerys and Drogon. There's only so many perfect appearances you can make before it becomes like, I call you now sort of thing. And why doesn't he kill Jon? Well, I don't think he kills Jon because I don't think he sees the attack happen, and I don't think Daenerys believes it happens. As Daenerys is going down dying, I do not think she believes that this has happened. I do not think she believes that Jon has killed her. And so when Drogon sees it, Drogon just sees, dead mom, and dude here was there for it, but mom didn't think he had it, so wasn't that. Instead, her last thoughts probably would have been on the Iron Throne and on the how she's destroying the wheel, and I guess that's my thought as to why he would go and attack that.
Just to jump in front of Nick, I'm so sorry, Nick, for 1 second, but I do think that this means that Drogon would have failed miserably at Among Us. Like, Jon was in there with the body and has no excuse.
Sus.
Go ahead,
Sus.
Nick.
Super sus. I highlighted so after the stabby and Drogon lands in the space, I thought it was interesting that there were 2 fire blasts on a rewatch. Stupid balloons. I thought that in my mind, yes, Drogon turns and blows fire at the Iron Throne, but he actually just sprays into the air first. Like he has the threat, like he's going to bear down on Jon. And in my mind, I kind of equated this to, again, maybe I'm overthinking it. I equated it to Drogon's so upset that Dany's gone, he just wants to blast something. Because he shoots a fire blast over Jon's shoulder, and Jon just kind of shrugs from the blast of it. And then he does another one that's aimed at the chair. And maybe, obviously it's symbolic that he's blasting the chair, but maybe I'm undercutting my own thought that maybe there's some kinship there with Drogon and Jon. But maybe Drogon's just blasting in the general vicinity, and with his fire breath, he hits the chair. I don't know. There's so much there that's either not written well or could be made more poignant. But I wanted to highlight really quick, Jon is accepting his fate. We can have a conversation about the Jon and Tyrion after the event conversation that I'd like to talk about. But Jon stands there, kind of is afraid at first, and then lowers his eyes to accept that he's about to be burned. He doesn't, I think Amanda said that he doesn't feel like this was the right decision. He has a lot of regret after getting rid of Dany. He still isn't sure if it's the right move. And when he stands there kind of covering his eyes, waiting for the inevitable death, Drogon just blasts off randomly into the corner and then blasts at the chair. And maybe it's just you're so angry at something, but you can't, because and he just lashes out at something else in the room. And maybe it just happened to be in the direction of the chair. So I really didn't know how to take that particular scene. It's neat to give it a lot of symbolism and overthink it, but it could also just be that was that particular thing that got the brunt of the fire blast. Gear Bear.
You're overthinking it. First of all, I think we covered this, but I thought it was very silly that Drogon apparently knew immediately that Dany died. Brrr! And then came to visit. Okay, cool. I guess they have a kinship. Also, back to Nick's point, is it that Drogon, conspiracy theory, is breaking the wheel? He is actually the breaker of the wheel in this episode because he breaks the Iron Throne. And when he gets angry, he's like, this isn't Jon's fault. This is the monarchy's fault. And so systemic monarchy. And so he needs to destroy the symbol of systemic monarchy. And so he destroys the throne. Also, I think it's broken up into 2 fire blasts because, first of all, it needs to be the initial shock of what did he do? Well, he shot the throne. Well, instead of making it one consistent blast, he shot the throne and then he goes in for a killing blow. I have more conspiracy theories, but before that, I'm going to pass to Amanda.
Gary saving all his big words for the last episode. Systemic monarchy. I'm impressed.
To back up
Backing out again. Sorry.
To back up Gary's conspiracy theory that I honestly don't think is a conspiracy theory in this regard, I don't think it's a mistake for the symbology of that Drogon is being compared constantly as basically Valyrian the Dread reborn again. Wasn't it Balerian's fire that forged the throne in the first place? And now
Yep.
Drogon is the one that's breaking it, which is a perfect support of Gary's so-called conspiracy theory. Sorry,
It's like-
Gary. I think you're just used to thinking everything that you do is a conspiracy.
It is all a conspiracy. With how poorly this episode is written, anything can be a conspiracy.
I mean, again and again, I can't wait until the books are out because I just want more details. There was numerous times in this episode that I wrote why, what? Like I'm not saying it's unbelievable, but I want about 50 more details before that point so that I understand what's going on.
I would agree. Like, I think that all of these could be the way things end, but there's just so many more details that would make it much more like fulfilling as a George R.R. Martin story.
Mhm.
Sorry,
it's like a connect the dots game, but then they're just like guessing at the end before they actually finish what the picture is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I did also note again, just tiny little realistic details. After he did burn the sword thrown down or whatever, they did a nice job of the snow around it was also melted away. Again, just nice little snow details I liked. That was gone. But him carrying her body, picking up carefully and flying away with it, I mean, your heart does break a little bit. Stephen, tell me that even your
No.
hardened heart. Nope.
Not even slightly.
Gary's hoping that Drogon flies out over the water and then drops her from a great height.
That would be funny.
I actually did think that. I actually was like, this would have been like a much more like
Oops.
that's what I actually thought was gonna happen. I was like, oh wait, that can't happen. That's too.
It's what
that's too
Danny would have
simple.
wanted. Kobe.
Go ahead, Tyler.
I will have to say, speaking of Drogon burning the chair, John has to be quite warm standing that close next to a dragon's
yeah.
fire coming out like that.
It's like
Also,
a
Just
fountain.
doesn't
Mysteries of Dragonfire.
just doesn't need a hat.
Fire
that's
does
all, he's
not
fine.
affect a Targaryen.
Oh.
Or does
Also-
burn a Targaryen, whatever.
Danny is supposed to be unique in that regard. Although
Also, it's
House of the
supposed to be-
Dragon,
It's supposed to
Seems
be a
like they're
one-time
changing it.
thing. Yeah.
yeah,
Also,
twice
too,
in her case.
where did all the blood come from around Dany? And
I
Out
think
of her nose and her cheek and that one like little stream.
yeah, those
Well,
two little tiny streams, because her where she got stabbed, there's no blood at all pouring out of there. Also, John lost a good knife when Drogon took Dany's body away.
that's
Oh,
true.
true.
Did anyone think that maybe the blood on her face and mouth was definitely digital? Like it probably wasn't like a blood packet or something?
I think that was probably real
Looks like a practical effect.
practical
To me.
effect. There we go.
I could see it either way. Yeah, it looked pretty.
Well, I just don't know
mean,
where they'd hide the way it was coming out of the nose. I don't know where they'd hide the blood packet. That's
they
what
did a really good job. If it wasn't practical, it was very realistic.
I
mean,
had a,
that number
I
of
had a
times I've
question
seen
on-
people bleed from the nose, but
I had a question on that too. I again, I'm not privy to a lot of people getting stabbed in the gut, but does the blood necessarily come up in your mouth and your nose like that? I feel like you'd be like, "Oh, I'm stabbed," but
Well,
the fact
she
that
wasn't.
it, like,
I will say real quick, she was not stabbed in the gut. She was stabbed in the heart. If you
Oh,
were
yeah, that's
stabbed
right.
in the gut, that takes you a very long time to die, like hours to die, because
Maybe
you
chest
died
cavity.
from bleeding.
Was
Yeah,
she?
I will succeed
Yes.
my understanding of
went-
murder to Steven. I'm
It's
sure
true.
Steven understands murder
The
better.
knife went up under her rib cage into her heart, and that's why she died so quickly. You wouldn't.
I
die so
didn't
quickly
see
from anything
that.
else.
Between the third and
stabbed
fourth
her in the
rib.
heart.
Yeah, it's specifically between the third and fourth clavicle and the 35th vein artery.
Guys, I'm
34th
growing more
parallel.
concerned about this person that I live with.
As the Hound so elegantly told Arya there, you remember where to stab me, right? And then she walked away.
As-
Call back.
I would say John is quite familiar with Danny's ribs, if you know what I mean.
Boo!
Hey.
Nick made a very inappropriate gesture, everyone in the audience, so you can all just boo him.
All
And
you
the
are is
comment.
inappropriate gestures, Gary.
So now we are on to the grand choosing. Oh, Gary, you're holding up two fingers. There's no one in front of you.
I
Gary just stands
have
for peace. He just wants peace
I've
to reign
been-
throughout his life.
holding conspiracy theories.
Oh, boy.
So
It's the
first
last
con-
episode.
Hold
Let
on.
him get him out.
Let me check
theory-
out real quickly.
Okay, Tyler's out. Conspiracy theory number 3 for this episode, and that is Dany is taken away by Drogon. Where do they go? My conspiracy theory is that she is brought back to Old Valyria to rest with her ancestors.
You're wrong.
Nick?
Or
In the fires of Mount
Volantis.
Doom.
In the fires of Mount Doom, yes, she's
I-
brought back and destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom.
I
Nick.
apologize because I want to have a source for this, but I don't remember where I read this. But it was confirmed, I want to say by the showrunners, that she was brought back to Old Volantis to the Red Priestesses who live there, because the Red Priestesses, like Melisandre, not Missandei, who got her head cut off, but Melisandre, who was the Red Priestess who revived Jon. The other Red Priestesses all in Old Volantis are renowned for reviving people who have passed away. Again, later on at the end of this episode, when they're having the small council, they say, "Does anyone know where Drogon is?" And Sam starts to say he was last seen flying over, and then gets cut off. But the thought is that she was flying east across the Narrow Sea back to Old Volantis. And I don't know if Drogon just knew, I'm going to bring mommy back to this area because they could maybe help her, or if the dragon knew this is what I was supposed to do if she died and bring her here.
I think it was definitely
I
said east before it was cut off. I'm
East.
pretty sure the word east did come
I
up.
hate that I don't have a source for it because I hate blanket statements without backing up information, but I'm
Nick,
pretty
we're just
sure
gonna-
that was the thought.
Bullshit.
Maybe
That's gonna assume you're
Drogon
bullshit.
and Dany discussed her last will, so he's just carrying it out like he's the effector
Right.
there.
Like
Don't
I
know.
said,
I'm
buried
sure
at sea,
whatever this
Drogon just flies
answer
out over the
is-
Narrow Sea and drops her.
This is what mommy
I'm sure
wanted.
whatever this answer is going to be like the one detail that George R. R. Martin actually gets to write himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
I will
whoever
I will
his
forgive
heir
him
apparent
for
will.
I will forgive him for everything if he writes the book. All of them.
I'm sorry I didn't get the Springs. What's it called? Spring.
The what?
Dreams
What's
of
the
Spring?
next book?
Winds of Winter?
Dreams of Spring.
Oh,
Or Winds
No,
of Winter.
Winds of Winter and a Dream of Spring or a Song of Spring.
That's it, yeah.
Dream of Spring,
I'm sorry
yeah.
I didn't get out the next books. I was trying to figure out where I was going to have Drogon fly off with Dany's body. I'm sorry, everyone. Got that detail figured out, and so here's your books.
Okay. Also, an addition on that, am I the only one on the rewatch who's like, Drogon flies away with not only the murder weapon, but also the murder victim? Like, Jon has shitloads of plausible deniability, and yet
Ooh.
his entire story is known by Grey Worm. Like,
I forgot
shitloads
about
of
that this
plausible
time.
deniability.
But I have thought about that in the past. I mean, Jon is just simply too honorable and too much Ned
Yeah.
Stark's son, whether or not technically in that sense, to ever to do that. But maybe he should have, you know? Maybe it was okay to lie this once. Maybe it was okay to break an oath this once.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, he could have just come down. But I'm in the same boat as Amanda, that there's no way he would have come down and said that he did anything other than walk down the steps and be like, I just killed the queen, and her body was carried off by Drogon. Maybe
I imagine he walked out of there and yelled, "'Twas I! 'Twas I who murdered the queen!"
Can you imagine like what the real life reaction though was of Grey Worm? Like
I don't
what
even
would he
know
have
if that's
just
history.
done?
Sorry, I just assume it's a history thing.
Would Grey Worm have just like almost had an aneurysm on the spot? Like how I wonder how Jon broke the news and who he broke it to. Or did
Right.
he just walk up and say, "Arrest me, I just killed the queen"? That probably
Maybe-
that's what I feel
maybe
like he would have
Drogon
done.
left the Iron Throne room and flew off at such a low height that Grey
Everyone
Worm
saw,
saw the
I
body
could
and
see
the knife
that.
sticking out of her heart.
And they come over, and Jon presumably is splashed with blood, not from the battle, but it's definitely our queen's.
When they first meet at the Dragon Pit and they show everyone the threat of the White Walkers, and then Jon says, "I can't swear an oath to two queens," and Tyrion has that line to Jon. He goes, "Did it ever occur to you to lie just once?
Yeah.
Maybe just once."
Just
Maybe
once.
that's again what should have happened. Jon comes out, "I killed the queen. You should have lied." Damn, I didn't think about that. It's just he's too honorable not to do that.
Like we talked to you about this before.
I have another conspiracy theory, so I'll let Tyler go first.
I don't have conspiracy theories. I was getting ready to move on to the next point, so go ahead with your.
Conspiracy theory number 4. We acknowledge that before Dany is murdered, it is winter. And my previous assumption was that winter, no, it's snowing. It's just not winter, but it's snowing in King's Landing.
Don't think that's really snow. I think that is ash, but
Sometimes I thought it was ash, and sometimes I thought it was snow.
Mm-hmm.
continue
not
on
been
anyways.
clear.
It's not real clear, yeah. But continue on anyways, Gary, with your conspiracy theory.
With the assumption that it's snow, and that would imply that the White Walkers were not the only factor that controlled the seasons of winter and the cycles of winter. So, conspiracy theory, there is still a White Walker threat on the horizon.
Dun dun
For-
dun.
No,
Expanded universe,
no.
White Walkers 3.0.
The White Walker, like the Night's King had power over
The
the
Night
weather
King was
there,
killed, yeah.
but they weren't the reason for the weather to change to winter. They were just the reason for the long night, the everlasting winter.
I agree. Like what Tyler said, because he said the Night King is coming and he brings the storm with him. Like the winter, the blizzard is coming, but the Night King isn't just the snow. It's
Conspiracy
nothing.
theory. I don't remember what number we're on.
5.
We're on 5.
5. Okay.
5.
Thank you.
The Night King can bring the winter. He has the power to also affect the weather. But once they wipe out the White Walkers, then the seasons go back to an actual tilt of the earth rather than the different time.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that's why, because they mentioned in the books early on that the seasons long ago supposedly used to be rather regular. No one, but we don't have any proof of that. I bet this is my conspiracy theory. The White Walkers brought the strange. You never knew how long each season was going to be.
So are you telling me that the White Walkers warped the fabric of space-time, tilting the planet in a way that changes its elliptical orbit around its sun, changing the seasons? And I can keep going. I'll stop now.
Sounds like climate change hoax.
They're gonna be really shocked when the next couple of years, like it's the same like regular seasons always, and it's gonna mess them up for a long time, but they are gonna get used to it. Go ahead, Gary.
Conspiracy theory number 6.
Yeah.
With the death of the Night King, much like an RPG, it opens a new section of the map. And that is how Arya can go west of Westeros.
Oh, that makes
land
sense.
doesn't
Actually,
exist until she completes that gate.
there's like this barrier you just keep bouncing off of a little bit.
I regret nothing. Back to you,
That was-
Tyler.
That was why all those other seafaring people, like, wasn't there a Brandon, a shipbuilder that disappeared and never came back? He went into that barrier, he despawned.
In the theme of the Lord of the Rings, maybe she sailed west into the blessed realm of Valinor.
Oh.
I mean,
I award you no points, but I'm counting it.
there's a definition of dying in either land, so.
Right.
All right, so we are going to move on and get to our first possible definitive explanation that there has been a passage of time when Tyrion says he's been held captive for multiple weeks there. And
I wish to know exactly how many weeks.
Let it be stricken from the courts that this shall be left anonymous intently.
They at least acknowledge time has passed for once in this episode.
I guess.
But we're at the grand part where they choose a new ruler. And to go
Steven
off
with his
here,
head in his hands.
what unites people? Stories. ... This is what I wrote in my notes here. Who has a better story than Bran the Broken? ... Anyone else there or being held captive for a change? Bran apparently breaks the wheel. That's what Bran is. His rulership now basically breaks the wheel because now they're going to elect somebody after Bran dies. No longer will kings be spawns of the previous king. And then I wrote this in complete sneer quotes here too, just so everyone knows. When Bran says, "Why do you think I came all this way?" It's like, the fuck, dude. The fuck.
What the fuck?
And
symbolism, he's in a wheelchair and he broke the wheel.
he doesn't need the Iron Throne
my
anymore
God.
to sit down.
Wow.
Also, I got this part too here that I don't remember this from the first watch. So this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit. When Bran names Tyrion his hand, Tyrion says, "I don't want it," but then Bran says, "I don't want to be king either." So it's like, then why
Then why
did
are
you
you-
come? Why did you come this way here then?
hmm
So
I feel like we went to too many quick quips and clever sentences that weren't actually rooted in anything.
oh yeah, that's right. We already said this previously. Oh shoot, we've gone too far.
Some writers patting themselves on the back for all these like great one-liners, and they're like, "Well, this doesn't actually string together very well." Well,
Doesn't
whatever.
matter.
We gotta
Nobody will
we gotta
know.
end
A
this
certain
scene
point
in
of
10
view.
minutes or less.
Exactly. Go ahead, Gary.
I didn't have any really inspirational things to add this scene, except for who the fuck are these other lords? Like,
There are
there's
some
some
randos
very
sitting there.
notable lords. There's the Stark's cousin who is in the mountainy place. I'm forgetting.
This
Robin
man has
Aaron?
watched
Your aunt,
all
Aunt Liza,
of these seasons.
Why, mommy?
Robin Aaron.
Yeah, that
all
guy.
grown up.
Oh, Robin Aaron. Yeah, Robin Aaron.
Robin Aaron, and then Robin Aaron's second in command
Lord
of that area.
Royce.
So technically, he's
Lord Royce.
Still alive.
He's
Yes.
pretty much a Sansa follower practically now. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was their uncle and
Edmure.
Edmure.
the Onion Knight and
Davos.
the the head of the King's Guard, all these people,
Brienne.
and then there's just some
Brienne was the head of
random
the
ass
King's Guard
fucking
at that time.
yeah, Brienne, and there's just some random ass extra people that
Yeah,
aren't
there's-
ever explained, and I don't know if you need it if you like somebody zoomed in to find sigils. I'm
we
sure the
ass-
internet knows.
We assume
the
that
Prince
there's
of
the new-
Dorne is there. The, new
Prince
prince.
of Dorne, and then Yar
Okay.
is there as well for the Iron Islands.
Yep.
hmm
Yep.
And then after that, it's
But
like,
I
who the
don't-
fuck are these people?
And
Yeah,
and
like
Sam.
there's
Sam,
somebody
yeah.
by the Prince of Dorne, and I'm like, I have no clue who that guy is. He's in like kind of a furred outfit, so I'm like, I don't know here.
There's another
I'm
one
just
by
gonna-
Sam.
I'm just gonna jump in
Yeah.
really quick. Again, watching with subtitles, it says Davos, I, Robin Aaron, I, and it goes to each person, but it does pop up and say man, I, man 3, I. Like they don't even know whose names they are. They could have just written in. I don't know how they do subtitles in movies, or if like the audio track is supposed to pick up these names and promote this when the screen comes up, but they're just listed as man. So I have no idea who the quote unquote most powerful lords in Westeros are to
Right,
sit on this
I-
council of 12, and 3 of them don't even know who the heck they are.
Even looking,
Wait,
I was
there's
looking at
Bra-
IMDb's full cast for this, and like I can't. There's a couple things on here, like they've got Dornish Prince, they've got Riverlands Lord, they've got Ironborn Lord. I don't even know if it's them because I would need to like sit there with pictures, but I wish I would have some more details here. I'm just curious.
Bronn is the heir of the Vale, correct? Or the
The
High
The
Garden.
Reach,
Garden,
But
the Reach in the
Is
west.
but I
Bronn
don't
there
think
at
it's
the
happened
Council of-
yet here.
Yeah, is Bronn there?
Bronn's
at the
not
Council
there.
of Lords?
Bronn doesn't show up to the small council. He's not there at the king choosing.
And why is he
Which I
there at the
feel
small
like
council,
would have been
but whatever.
distracting. It'd have been super distracting if he was there, though. But
Well,
because
I've
he
written down
doesn't
several
really come in.
times where the F is Bronn, and then he just randomly appears in the small council. Quote unquote Lord of Lofty Titles.
Amanda?
Oh, sorry. You actually want me to give my opinion here? I totally zoned out for a second. I did make a note that just as we walk into the dragon pit there, the ruined dragon pit, I was like, I bet this ruin is the nicest building in King's Landing now. The nicest ruin of all of them. Did laugh at these guys. I mean, Sam tries his hand at proposing democracy and is literally laughed down.
I had that as well. Yeah.
Which it's I mean it's true that they've not really that it's way too radical for these guys. None of them have been a couple of them have tried to be the champions of the small folk, but most of them they're so far from that.
I think that was like specifically to slap the audience in the face because
Yeah,
somebody was
if-
like, what is the most expected answer? It's like, oh, well, they're going to implement democracy. And it's like, ha 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 ha. They laugh that down like in
Yeah.
frame. And then they
We give our
implement
horses a
like,
vote.
Yeah, in this case, to quote, if you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. And in that same vein, I don't have enough explanation for me to justify Bran as a choice because I thought it was a very quick, like, oh sure, let's have him be king. And Bran was in the first season showing great promise as a child, like learning all these things and everything. It's still not quite enough explanation for me to because everyone was disagreeing, and then suddenly they're like, yeah, sure, he can tell stories. That's fine with me. However, I would say I don't think he's a terrible choice, but it's just not clear enough to me why. Like, I want more explanation why.
If only they had more time to explain to us.
Right. I want
True.
the details. Like, why would Yara agree? She was just sitting there being like, he killed our queen and I want justice. So why on earth would she agree to Bran, who presumably is on Jon's side, who, is his brother, cousin, whatever you want to choose now?
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about this scene. This scene is just so I made this comment to Tyler. After the scene of the Siege of Winterfell, there was a whole bunch of military people out there that wrote articles about like, oh, how the military siege was bad and blah 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 blah. I can promise you, and I saw these articles happen. After this episode came out, there were a whole bunch of political scientists who literally wrote papers about how bad this council was, political science wise, because it just nothing makes sense. Yeah, we're gonna choose the guy the Bran the Broken, who apparently is he can't father any children, and that's apparently a good thing because dynastic dynastic succession and who's going to be up next has never been an issue in the Westeros before. Um, you're going to also choose a person who very, very much has said to everyone he doesn't live in this world anymore. He lives in the past. Like, I don't want someone who lives in the past ruling me. I want someone who lives here now with me. You're also giving the seat to a great house of the North, who then goes on to declare independence.
Yeah, that was kind of weird.
I am just blown away by that one point right there, because the second Sansa says, "Oh nope, we're not actually going to be part of this confederation anymore. We're now our own thing." Every other lord at that table will go, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa! If that's what it's going to be, I am taken out. I'm not.
I
This
thought
is
the same thing.
blowing
Yep.
it up."
Nepotism.
Yeah, it would be. It makes absolutely no sense. They would. The only thing that I could think about, and I talked to Amanda about different sorts of monarchies and whatnot. What type of monarchy is this that they're creating? And it doesn't seem like they have any real thought input into it. Like they're just they're ratifying something right there, right then. You know what? This would take months. This would take maybe years to get this into place, because they would all be sitting around going, all right, well, let's what's the weigh this and weigh that, blah 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 blah. It would take forever. And I got to be very honest, I don't even know how Tyrion is able to suggest it in the first place. He starts talking, and Grey Worm, the magnificent slaughterer of children, goes on to say, "Oh, you don't get to talk here." And he goes, "But it's not for you to choose," as if like, you know what, Grey Worm the Amazing, who steps on, the uninjured's necks, would do after that? He would kick Tyrion. Like, yeah, slap him. He wouldn't just let him keep talking. No one would let him keep talking. He's a prisoner there. So how does he get to keep talking other than just the show rights just want us to keep going? The entire council is just absolutely nuts. Nick.
I had two thoughts on this. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm neutral on this. I don't think Bran. When people say who has a better story than Bran, everybody. Again, Edmure Tully is there, and they all tell him to shut up and sit down. And Robin Aaron, who is pretty close with his mom up into his teen years, is also there. Like, there's some people who do have a worse story than Bran.
Everybody of
But
importance has a better story than Bran the fucking broken.
I think that Bran is not the worst choice, but yeah, I'm not on board that he is the best either. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be one of those people there. Like, if you want to try and break the wheel, grab some person who, I mean, nobody understands the plight of the middle class or the lowborn than somebody who's of the middle class or lowborn. Like, they don't have to choose necessarily just somebody from that group, but again, that's the scorn that they all have, is that it has to be somebody of high birth and high stature. So they choose the current heir to the Stark household. But yeah, I agree with what Steven said too, that the second everybody else was backed out, or somebody said, it's not going to be our kingdom, it's not going to be one of them, I thought everybody else would jump into it and be like, nope, we're done. But they just, okay, sure, that sounds fair.
Oh yeah. Oh well.
I mean, the North is bigger than all the other kingdoms combined, they've said multiple times. So it's like, yeah, they have maybe the biggest military might now, with the Lannister army in Westeros defeated, and in the South, the King's Landing destroyed. But I don't see the push there either. The one other comment I did have on this, and then I'll turn it back over to whoever wants to talk next, is there's a scene that I wrote down when at Winterfell, before the Long Night battle, Tyrion walks up to Bran, who's sitting in the wheelchair, and says, Bran, tell me your story. And he has a conversation with Bran about where Bran has been and how he's become the Three-Eyed Raven. And Bran says, it's a long story. And Tyrion says, we've got time. And then it cuts to something else. And we have no understanding of what transpired, what they talked about, what they agreed to. And again, I've alluded a couple times on these recordings. I don't know fully what Bran's powers are, if he can foresee the future or he gets glimpses of the future. But I mean, you want to talk conspiracy theory? I would say my conspiracy theory for this would be that Bran says there's going to come a time when you are in charge of picking the next king. I want you to pick me. Or something to that extent, because then the line of why do you think I came all this way would make the most effing sense. But that's why it's a conspiracy theory. I don't think that that's what transpired, but that's where that line came justified to me when I was trying to wrap my head around it. Aside from that, it's weird that, yeah, they just went ahead and picked Bran. And if they'd led with, because we won't be tormented by his kids, it would even have made more sense. But just on stories alone, nobody else knows what Bran has gone through other than us as the omnipotent watcher. So we don't have, nobody else there would have any understanding to go with from, let's pick this kid. And everyone else is like, okay. So it's a little fast. It doesn't quite follow, but he's also better than some other options too. He does have the lordship. He does come from a great house, and he does seem to have some foreknowledge that seems otherworldly. So maybe he's got some reason for being there. But again, that would be more terrifying to me as a person who's not fully able to understand it than somebody I'd want to aspire to or call Lord.
Nick,
my 2 cents.
your conspiracy theory lacked enthusiasm, so I'm not counting it. We're still at 6.
Ouch.
You didn't bluntly explain that it was a conspiracy theory. You were just like, I don't know, maybe it's a conspiracy theory. Maybe I like goats. Anyway,
your
Tyler.
sneer I count as a badge of honor, Gary. I don't have a conspiracy theory to add to your board.
You didn't announce it with the proper enthusiasm, with the proper pizzazz, apparently.
There you go.
Showmanship.
I definitely did, but I don't. I mean, that way I get away with it, and no one thinks I'm just mocking Gary.
I don't have as much of a passion for fallacy as Gary does, apparently. I leave the fiction to you, good sir. Tyler.
Phallic, yes.
I was waiting for. I knew it.
So, speaking of the scene where Sansa all of a sudden decides to go rogue and go independent, I remember they shot over to Yara then shortly after that, and she had the kind of like the what the fuck look on her face, because she had requested that the Ironborn go independent to Daenerys way back when she allied herself with Daenerys. And now she's like, this motherfucker gets to go independent and I don't? The fuck?
Kind of forgot about that. You're right.
There would be a major war happen for that. It might not be like the intensity of what we were experiencing before, but there is no central authority right now. There is no central government. Who the fuck is keeping them all together? No one.
Dogs and cats living together, anarchy in the streets.
Oh God.
And hey, if Yara's upset with how everything played out, why don't they just go back and talk to Daenerys?
So then here too, this is where I could probably bring up the part I started this episode with of Varys' letters. They're keeping Jon captive in the Red Keep because he killed Daenerys there. Who has a better story than Bran? How about the guy who is the heir to the throne through. I mean, obviously they're going to break the wheel and no longer have their children be rulers and stuff like that. But it's like
Stupid.
Varys's letters had to have gotten out. You would have thought. So then, why aren't the maybe they didn't go to the right lords then, or something like that, or maybe the carrier raven. My apologies. Got shot down, so the notes never actually made it there, or something like that. But it's like you would have thought maybe some of those letters Varys wrote had gotten out and gotten to some of these lords who are now deciding on the future ruler of Westeros. Nick.
Gary, this is just for you, so I hope you enjoy it. Conspiracy theory! Better? 7. Okay. Varys, as the Master of Whisperers, I don't think would be in poor taste enough to send out something that would fail or that he sent it to the wrong lords. So Varys's letters may have gotten out as the conspiracy, but on what credibility do they have? If you received a letter from Dany, a letter from Varys, who has pledged himself to Dany to suddenly say, the person who I'm backing isn't the right person. You should go with this, for most of those lords' understanding, the bastard of Winterfell. It does seem a little sketchy to suddenly say he's actually the most important person in the world. So maybe all the lords that got Varys' letters just didn't take them to heart. Conspiracy theory.
That would still be a lever for other, lords to kind of pull or prod at. And it's just the
Sure.
fact that it just disappears off the face of the earth, I think, is important, because I think this would have a big I don't know, impact on that council. But again, the council wouldn't take 5 minutes; it would take months, and this sort of stuff would come up.
The people that hate Jon because he killed Dany, even if they knew he was the Targaryen prince, I think they probably would have despised Jon still because he killed their beloved queen. And the people that have always loved Jon, like Arya and Sansa, have always loved Jon. And so it just reconfirms their faith that he's the proper choice. So I don't know how big of a sway it would have been. Maybe that's why the 3 randos showed up, because they're like, oh, Jon should be freed.
So then it is decided, speaking of Jon, that he is to be sent to the Night's Watch, which apparently still exists, even though the wall has a giant hole in it and the wildlings are everyone's friends now. He is sent to the wall to please the Unsullied, which now the Unsullied and the magical Dothraki that are still somehow alive are leaving Westeros. So who the fuck cares what they do with Jon then? Because the Unsullied aren't going to be around to worry about it then. And then, of course,
And why
the Unsullied are sailing to the Isle of Narth. So this is kind of a more lore thing for those of us who are a little deeper into the history of the world. The Isle of Narth is home to butterflies that are very poisonous to outsiders there. So unless you grew up on the island, you're very susceptible to the poison that these things spread. So this entire army of these people who are not native to the Isle of Narth, who are just going there because Grey Worm had a thing for Missandei, are going to go there anyways and then all die anyways. So what is the point? Why send Jon to the wall?
So,
Go ahead,
and
Amanda. Take your turn, Steven.
I know what Steven's going. Well, possibly I know what Steven's going to say. So when we got to this point in the show, and I made what I thought was a super clever comment about Grey Worm going on his little boat ride to the killer butterflies. And Steven, I wish you could have seen the look on his face. He turned to me with the most like, "What are you talking about?" He had not heard of the butterflies and the whole thing, and until then I didn't think about the fact that, is it not mentioned in the show at all, the butterflies?
No, it's not.
She's just mentioned, she's just
Yep.
from the Isle of Noth. And so I start telling him this, and I couldn't remember all the details. We ended up having to Google it, and you can see in Steven's face that he totally doesn't believe me. Apparently, an island of killer butterflies that you can only visit at night didn't sound realistic to him or something. I don't know what his problem was. However, thank God Google vindicated me, and he had to admit that I was right. But yeah, I don't understand where Grey Worm is going. I don't understand why. Maybe the show is just saying, because they've never mentioned the butterflies, that this doesn't actually exist, and that's why he's just going to go visit. That's my best guess, because he's going to die. if he's got a death wish, then he could have done it 10 minutes ago and let John not go to the wall.
So, but okay, and here's where I was coming from, is back to where that council's taking place at this point in time. He is super against not letting John live. And up until here, and this is why I didn't talk about the most glorious warrior of honor, Grey Worm, murderer of small children. He has been all about flaunting his, military strength, doing whatever he feels is right, killing whoever he feels is right on a whim up until this point. But now he's going to take advice from this fractious council who can't even keep one of their own members in it. Like, forget backhanding Tyrion while he's talking. Why didn't he just go in there and stab John? Like, it makes no sense to me that he didn't do that. With the I'll stop. With the Grey Worm that we know now, there's no reason why he wouldn't just summarily execute the person who killed the queen. There's no reason.
Steven, they're both surrounded by plot armor.
They are. You're right.
Encased in plot armor.
I know, but it was just striking to me that this belligerent military fascist who has dominated everyone through use of military power for the last 2 episodes now is just like, oh, well, you're telling me I can't? Well, what can I have then? Like, yeah, that makes sense. No. Going a little further, since we were just going on to what ends up with him, I don't actually know what happens to the Dothraki either, because I have a very strong feeling they don't get on the ships, and they don't show what happens to the Dothraki. They show them in that military formation, and that's it. They're gone.
Nope, they're on the port there.
They do?
I was gonna say,
I didn't see them.
The last time we see them,
Oh,
there's
they're
two
walking around the port?
by the
Yeah,
port, so they're meant to get on the ships, was my thought. I don't no idea where they go. Back to the Essos? I have no idea.
They hated going on ships before, and they had to have basically Danny tell them to get on. You think that Grey Worm now is going to be able to get them to go on a ship? Okay, I don't agree with that either. So one way or another, I don't know what happens with the Dothraki. Makes no sense. They just kind of disappear.
Now this is when they vanished there. This is when they all died.
Yes.
Like it was like lag when they were out there fighting the army of the undead, and now the lag finally caught up to them, and now they died.
But in exchange, do you know what they get for exchanging out the Dothraki? Another fleet of ships, guys. I don't know where they keep getting them, but they have another fleet of ships. How many fleets of ships have they burnt to the ground? Who knows? But they have another.
Which is also undercut. Again, this is where like the last episode here, this is where I'm all on board with the poor writing. Because at the very end, we hear Davos, the master of ships, complaining that we need more ships. So, or they had some ships left in the harbor, but now those are the ones we just gave off to the Unsullied, so we need more ships.
Are you going to tell Grey Worm no?
Yes, apparently you can. All you have to do is say some big words, and he goes, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, he trotted off onto that ship before he even ensured that John was actually John wasn't even on a ship or even out of the city before Grey Worm was like, "Oh, cool, they said it's all right."
We want to talk about.
We're gonna hold this city entirely hostage for this, and then you didn't even ensure. He had a lot of faith in their honesty, which is very impressive.
He doesn't know anything about the Night's Watch or the Castle Black, so maybe they're just like, it's very far off. Don't worry, he'll go and he can't do anything there. It'll basically be a timeout. Okay, sounds good.
And not just that, but he came there to conquer the Westeros, and now they are leaving. They're taking literally everyone who went to the Westeros and just giving it back to them. Like, they didn't break the wheel. He was at the conference where they remade the wheel. This end part, this is the third of the 3 sections, which should have been their own episode. And this third part is so damn rushed. It is so incredibly rushed. It should have taken months and years to show the progression of this diplomatic negotiations, the withdrawal of the Unsullied, the negotiations for Jon, all that sort of stuff. And that would have been amazing to watch in an episode. Instead, we have this rushed 30-minute whatever it is.
To make a joke off of this here too, and I'm going to share this video here after this podcast ends with you guys. Somebody did a kind of like 90s rom-com movie like ending there where they had like the people show up on screen and then like after the episode they did this or something like that. So I'll share that video with everyone here, but it was hilarious because that's basically what this episode ends up being here at the end of.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read off like the stuff here that kind of happens, and there's one I want to touch on a little bit further here too. But like, so Arya is now sailing west of Westeros. Brienne is now the head of the Gold Cloaks, where she's now updating Jaime's page in the books there, writing in ink, turning the page while the ink's still wet, writing some more, and then closing the book while the ink's still wet. Okay.
Said the same thing.
Tyrion is now the hand, moving some chairs around, which is totally a needed scene for this episode here by far.
Oh my gosh, I had that down too of like, was that needed? Like, what are we trying to accomplish with this scene?
I mean, it shows that Tyrion is nervous to take back over the role of the hand there, but it's like, it's not needed for the end of this show here.
Such wasted time.
He's
Exactly.
trying to put back things and straighten out the world. That was what that metaphor is.
Unnecessary, but I did actually like it as just a nice little detail since I didn't get enough details in this episode.
Pod is now a gold cloak, but relegated to pushing the king around in his wheelchair.
Hey, Pod looked smug. I wrote down Pod looked smug as crap in his gold cloak armor.
He's
When
pretty
they're like, Sir
happy.
Podrick, and he comes up like, damn right, mother trucker, and he walks
You know
off.
why? Because he's now in the town where all the brothels are going to be rebuilt, and he's going to have free reign.
They're still currently missing the Master of Whisperers, Laws, and War, which is kind of interesting. Those ones are missing there because they're maybe trying to move out of a world of war and all of that. But so Bronn somehow is the leader of the Reach. He's the head of the Reach, and he's now the Master of Corin, which a guy who didn't understand how loans work way back at the beginning is now the Master of the Coin. Bravos is the
Lord of
master.
lofty titles.
Davos is the Master of Sea, which that one makes sense because Davos
That makes
was
a lot of
smuggler,
sense, yeah.
sailing, all of that stuff. And Sam is now somehow a maester, and he's the Grand Maester in in King's Landing here.
Yeah, all of that is relegated by the Citadel in Old Town. Wouldn't they be like, if you have a new king, like we would be sending our current Archmaester. You can't just promote some rando who was here for a month and stole books from us when he left.
Right, didn't even finish his training, but promoted to Grand Maester. Cool. I mean, I think Sam would be a good one, but I feel like this would have been a fight to get him there.
Yeah, which could have been part of the Steven's prolonged episodes there, where
Yeah.
it shows like Sam's struggle to get promoted to his current position.
Well, and to point out one other thing, I mean, just because, Sam's a really smart dude, but how old is he in this show? Probably like, maximum 28 years old? There's no way you could read enough to actually be smart enough to need to be a maester at 28 years old.
Steven, passage of time is relative in this world, and he
That's
has
a true
fast
statement.
travel. So
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then the final point I'll touch on before we kind of go back to touch on one more point here too is Jon is now reunited with his buddy Tormund north there. He finally pets Ghost after he didn't do it the first fucking time. Although it seems like it's some reused animations of Ghost with just some touched up battle damage to him. The music is fan-fucking-tastic here at the end there. This entire ending is great music-wise.
Yeah.
But then it's kind of interesting. We see something growing in the ground north of the wall, which kind of signifies that the winter there is basically done.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gates close behind Jon as he's leading the army, or not the army, the wildlings, the free folk, basically continue north of the wall there.
Real quick, before we move on from that, I ranted to Amanda about this part. It said the exact same thing you said about why in the name of God is there even a Night's Watch anymore? They have a giant hole in the wall. And not just that, but why are the wildlings going so far north, like to resettle what they're going to do? Why not build a settlement if you really can't build on like the north side of the wall anymore? You have to build up on the wildlings side. Build a settlement in those trees right next to, where the freaking major Night's Watch place is, which is going to become a major trading settlement if you're at peace now. Like, what is going on here?
Steven calls that a rant, but we were watching the end of this. It did turn into a rant. We were watching the end of this and kind of quiet for a second, and then all of a sudden Steven goes, "Think they're gonna fix that gap in the wall?" Then went on his rant, which was totally fair because we were like, "What's the deal with the Night's Watch?" Pretty sure John pulled them all off the walls for the. Literally said there was no point in manning the wall anymore once the White Walkers got through.
And then the final point I wanted to touch on here, this happens before, but Sam presents Tyrion a book titled A Song of Ice and Fire.
You hate those tongue-in-cheek little references in show.
I hate them too.
This is freaking dumb. This is like the most
I
blatant.
didn't think it was that dumb. I thought it was more
audience, look, this is the title of the book the series came from here. So I even wrote down insert jerk off motion at that stupid fact.
Okay, hold on.
cutesy.
I'm also think this is just stupid tongue in cheek. Steven, I think said no. Amanda, what's your opinion on this?
I feel like it's a Tolkien reference. That's what The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey was. They said it was the book that Bilbo wrote at the end.
Oh, bam on your face.
Tolkien
Damn it,
did
Amanda,
it
why
better.
did you have to talk?
Wham.
Why did you have to talk?
High
It's
five
still
to
done
Amanda.
better in Lord of the Rings.
Tolkien
Also,
does it, and
They
Bilbo
cle-
Baggins says, "Look, I've made a book that's literally the story of the book here," and nobody bats an eye. But jerk off motion to Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin is rolling over in his would-be grave.
Also, they go out there and clearly mention that the book doesn't mention Tyrion, one of the biggest
that-
players in the entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is insane
So
because
stupid.
even if you're pretending like he wasn't important, he was notable in several different things. He was literally the hand three different times for three different.
Three.
So there is
He
no
must be this tall to be written about.
right. There is no way he would not have been mentioned.
Yeah,
There's an appendice in the back on Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things.
Okay, I have a different theory, which is that it could have been done better. And that is that you could make the joke, we made a story about this time period. Am I mentioned? No, which is hilarious and a good callback to the fact that Tyrion would never been given credit for the Battle of Blackwater Bay. However, maybe you do a slight tongue-in-cheek of like, well, what do they decide to call this? I don't know. It's about there's the ice up north. It's like the winter, and there's dragons. So what about the winter and the fire? And then just leave it at that. Like leave it as a tongue-in-cheek reference that is completely effing wrong. That would have been better than the Song of Ice and Fire. Like it's the Song of Winter and Dragons, and just like drop it at that.
That'd be
much
funny.
better.
I like that they
actually
went
be
full
really
on with
funny.
it.
Nick is the only one who thinks that was good. I think it could have been.
You get your positivity out of here.
I liked it. That's it. This book, The History of the World of Ice and Fire, that we've referenced because it's external.
No.
supplemental to the show.
No.
It's
We
written
haven't
from the
referenced.
Archmaester.
You reference it.
I reference it. It is in there listed as written by Archmaester Ambrose, who wrote that book. I think this is meant to be that book because it tells the history of the world, but also what transpires from the Battle of Blackwater on, or whatever it is,
It's like
whatever
after,
they reference.
they distinctly call out. I think it's like after Robert's victory on the Trident or something like that. I think they clearly call out where the book starts.
Yes.
Okay. Insert double jerk off motion. So a double Dutch rudder of the fact that not only do they have to name the book, but they have to name that it's a book within the book that's an actual real book in real life. I was like, just so fucking stupid. Sorry.
Nick, you may have caught this better than I did. Did they say the maester who wrote the book in the show, A Song of Ice and Fire?
In the
is
show,
it
they
referenced
said
to be the same?
Sam says he and Archmaester Ambrose wrote it, and I
Okay.
think that's who the name is in the book.
That
This book was tried to be composed from other Archmaesters' works to be a complete history of the world of Ice and Fire, and it's written by someone in the foreword.
Okay. That was my question there of like, is it kind of tie into that book then of who, air quotes, wrote the history part of it?
I believe so, or
Okay.
recorded the history. They didn't write recorded.
Yeah.
Correct.
Anything else
Like holding a big book.
from the end of the episode anyone want to talk about here? Did we kind of cover it all?
The two that we didn't cover were Sansa and Arya, I think. Yep.
You just keep rolling.
Like
have more,
mildly
too.
important.
Yep.
So what
Don't
happened
matter.
in this episode? This bit. Oh. And then what happened? Oh.
So,
I
Steven,
disgust at everything.
I think the one that was, I don't know how I exactly feel about, was Arya's, send off as.
I will say I
uh,
liked Arya's send off there. I felt like it was more befitting for her character, but I'm sorry I'm interrupting here.
Well, I don't entirely know like how she outfitted it, why she became a captain, all that sort of stuff. Again, it just feels like a little bit of a whim. I do enjoy that she seems at peace on it. And it seems like she's going off, and I made a comment to Amanda, oh, she's going to be so happy when she hits her first storm and it all overturns and they'll never see her again. And Amanda made the comment that apparently that one of the Starks did that before.
It was like Brandon the shipbuilder, Brandon the admiral, who knows?
I actually detracted from Arya's ending because she sailed off into the sunset, but she didn't sail off on a ship of her own making. She sailed off on a ship that was had a giant Stark banner, had a giant Stark figurehead. She didn't sail off as an adventurer. She sailed off as a Stark. So she sailed off as a commanding army searching to discover. She sailed off as Christopher Columbus.
No, she did not. She sailed off. We don't
That's
know
overthinking it.
Yes, it is, and we don't know.
You don't think that the fact that she has a giant effing Stark banner and a giant effing Stark figurehead matters?
That is her clan. She can put it on if she wants. It doesn't mean that she's under the Stark banner. It means that she is a Stark. It's different from like if I am flying the Howard banner because I am a Howard. It doesn't mean I am fighting for the armies of the Howards.
I would disagree because the North is its own independent kingdom. So I'm going to say Steven's completely wrong. She is flying under a country's flag.
She's not though. There's no flag.
Logic.
From what we can tell, there's maybe 25 people on her small boat. I would hardly consider that a war party.
Okay.
You need
I guess that's my detraction.
To
I've aired my grievance. We can wrap it up and move on.
I wonder where the boat's taking off from. It's not taking off from Winterfell, that's for sure.
I've aired my grievance. We can wrap up boats.
No, I want to continue with boats now.
Boats.
Was she actually sailing off into the sunset? Or is that
maybe she's gonna go get Grey Worm?
Well, I'm saying because or is that just Gary just saying that because if she's sailing west of Westeros, the sun. Wait, no, the sun.
Sunsets.
Yeah,
sunsets. Yeah.
Okay,
You're right.
Never
She's
mind.
sailing into the Smith.
I thought it was just a mistake
Tyler,
by the
west is opposite of east.
Oh, that's what I've been doing wrong all this time.
But in this world, don't they have like 3 suns, or is that Tatooine?
That's
Suns for Tatooine.
Two suns in Tatooine.
Get your references right, Gary.
Doesn't even know how many
I'm still
suns
counting
are in
it. I
Tatooine.
effed up a Star Wars reference. I'm counting it.
All
Terrible.
Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, we've been bouncing back and forth.
I like how happy Arya is there. We've never heard her at all express like. I think it was Bran that was like, "Oh, it'd be cool to be a sailor and go." We've never heard her express a thing for it, so I was like, exploring that could be her, but sailing I was surprised by. But you know what? Maybe Gary's right. Maybe this boat looks like a short-term thing. Maybe she'll go check it out, realize that the area has only extended a little bit, and she'll come right back. Who knows?
Yeah.
I thought she had expressed before, and I don't know if it was
I think she
jokingly
did
or something
too.
like that, but like
she
wanted to see
What's
what
west
was west of Westeros there.
Yeah.
She's asked, and people have been like, "No one knows," and so
But-
she. Sorry.
I was gonna say, but it is not set up though that she is this great sea captain or this great sailor there.
Not set up that she's on a boat.
Oh, real quick. And one other thing in that scene that blew my mind. They have fucking, what are they called?
Spyglass.
Spyglasses.
Periscopes, telescopes.
Oh my dear sweet God. If those existed in this world, they'd be used in every goddamn land battle by the generals trying to see what their troops were doing on the front. And they don't happen anywhere except for apparently this one chick on the sea. Oh,
Wait, guys, I've been holding on to this sentence the entire time. Steven, I don't want to quote you here, but we're getting too far into noting inconsistencies here.
get out of here! Get out of here!
Amanda was flashing fingers, and I thought I had to explain what conspiracy theory number we're on.
No,
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I was so excited to be able to throw his words back in his face. I've been
I was
holding on to that the
thinking-
whole podcast.
I was thinking that everybody was maybe getting a little too far into the fact that she's on this boat. I saw her as just like a passenger, not a sea captain. Not that she's saying, this is where we're going to say, go here. Like, I saw her as just like, she's the
Oh.
Lord of the Starks, since she's a princess.
You're going
or
for a boat
noble.
ride rather than being the
Go for a
captain?
boat ride, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, she can get on the boat and be like, I'm the highest born noble person on the boat. I want to go east. And the Starks aren't necessarily seafarers like the people of Bravos or the Ironborn would be, but they control the north. Their entire kingdom is surrounded by the narrow sea is a sea, but a giant ocean on the west. They would have some mariners who at least know how to. They have a boat with sails. Obviously, they'd have to have somebody who knows how to do it to facilitate building a boat, rather than would make float and they go out on the ocean. They'd have somebody that knows how to steer the damn thing because they got it out of port at least. So I would think that they have some mariners and she's just a passenger and she's like, I want to go west. And it was like, yes, my lady. And they go west. And just because that's where the map doesn't show there's anything west of Westeros, doesn't mean the second they get over the horizon and they can see the whatever it is, 23 miles or however far they can see out at sea, they don't instantly find some speck of land and she's like, all right, sounds good, and comes back.
I
Nick,
just hope that.
she's surrounded by seamen. That's all.
Oh, get
Oh my
out
God.
of here!
I just wonder if that boat took off from
And Gary
White Harbor.
smirks with simple glee that he was able to be horrible. Go
White
ahead,
Harbor
Amanda.
seems the assumption, like obvious place for building a boat that
Right.
seems that customized, but it's
Right.
literally on the east side, so she'd kind of have to go all the way around Westeros, and maybe that's actually okay with her. That might be faster than building a boat in what's on the west side, Torrens Square, maybe. I can't remember, but I don't know if
Something
there's
like
really.
that, yeah. So yeah,
Just-
I saw her more as a passenger, just like on the boat with people who knew how to steer it, more so than she's a seafarer captain and she knows how. I don't think she has any idea how to actually be on the boat. She's down just like getting dressed in the captain's quarters.
I just kind of assumed Arya's not coming back then, honestly.
Yeah,
Well,
me too.
it seemed like in the cut scene, the cutting back and forth between the three children there, basically Jon, Sansa, and Arya, it's kind of made it seem like she's in a room on the ship with a map and her spyglass and stuff like that, kind of indicating this is where we're going. At least that's the way I took those kind of flash jump scenes there, basically.
I had something else, but I forgot it. I remember now. She tells Baratheon, now who's in charge of Storm's Gendry, thank you. She tells Gendry, I can't be lady of anywhere or something. Yeah, I can't be a lady for anybody or something like that. So she can't. I mean, she doesn't have anybody else's name on her list that she has to go kill. Everybody else is done, and she's not going to be a permanent fixture as a lady in someone's household. So she really doesn't have anything else to keep her in Westeros either. So I guess I saw her as just going to go explore and just strike out on her own. It doesn't mean that she'll never come back, but I guess I didn't read into it too that she wasn't planning to stay out forever. Tyler.
And I will say here then too, to kind of move off of the Arya part onto the part that I was really rolling my eyes at was Sansa becoming.
You rolled your eyes at it?
What's wrong with the Queen in the North?
For some reason,
is it a sexist thing? You cheer for
totally.
Jon, but Sansa can't be
That's
it.
Totally
You
it.
son of a.
It didn't, for whatever reason, and this is at the time of just me watching the scene, it didn't feel quite earned for Sansa. Because the show did a bad job of showing her kind of taking the steps to become a true leader of everyone. It always was just kind of like her complaining about everything. Like we talked about multiple times. She always complained to Jon about Jon's doing the wrong thing, but she never had any solutions presented to Jon, at least. Like she might have had other solutions, but she never really presented anything of like, this is what you should be doing. We saw some scenes of her in Winterfell taking charge and saying, oh, we should do this, direct all the grain to come here or outfit all of these armored plates with leather and stuff, but the show never really quite presented to us that she had, and I could be wrong here, but necessarily it felt like earned her spot as being queen there, other than, oh, I'm an
She was
independent
a
nation now. Go ahead,
she's a
Gary.
lady. She's the head lady of a great house. She's the organizer of making sure that her subjects in her area are well fed and they're safe. They're within their walls, like all that. But yeah, not a ruler. Also, Nick, you're gonna pull out of your effing book. What the hell is with her crown? Is it something symbolic of the old kings of the north? I looked at her crown, I paused, I was like, it just looks like somebody just put two little metal things in the front. I don't know what the hell it was supposed to be. I didn't know if anyone else actually.
No, it's
Direwolves
two
for Stark.
direwolves.
One
There
on
were two
each end.
direwolves
Two white
fighting.
direwolves. It was all it was.
I immediately am
Okay.
Googling this.
It's
It's
two
two-
direwolves. I promise.
I know there's a direwolf on either side of her chair, but like the crown wasn't. I didn't think the crown was very inspirational, and the outfit was very that movie with Hunger Games. It was very
I thought
much a
I thought
Hunger
her gown
Game.
was very tied into a bunch of different things. They showed zoomed in when she pulled her sleeve up. It has the red leaves from the weirwood tree, Godswood. Very old gods vibey from Winterfell.
Yeah, it had some like
just-
scales on it too to reflect the Tully heritage.
It was totally done up.
So it was it just seemed very. I guess she's a queen, very extravagant, very.
You have
I don't
no
know.
style sense, my friend.
I don't. I'm just a sexy man who doesn't know how to dress right.
Debatable.
Anyway,
Next point.
Amanda.
You are right, Gary. Her crown is two, or whoever said it. There's two dire wolves. That's what it is.
Both
Huh.
Nick
Steven
and I
and I.
said it.
High
Both
five.
Nick and I said it. High five.
Okay, is it an impressive direwolves?
Yes.
Like
That's
I would
pretty
expect
impressive.
it would
It's a
be
crown.
like
She's a queen.
one giant direwolf with teeth and stuff, but like it looks very
They tried to make it more
pretty
feminine
princess.
and small.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say, I defer to my good friend Mr. Steven on the historical perspectives of crowns. Aren't female queen crowns less gaudy than male crowns?
I think yes, but only in the terms of most
Most kings
kingdoms
outrank queen.
well, yeah, exactly. Most kingdoms were patriarchal, so the kings would have the greater crown by default.
Yeah. I mean, Cersei had the same thing. Cersei's crown looked like a Lannister lion, but it was very small in comparison to Joffrey's crown or Tommen's.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I believe they said that the old crown of the kings in the north was lost or something. I don't know if they actually still have it.
Aegon the Conqueror's crown was lost by Baelor the Blessed in the continent of Dorne.
And the kings in the north, I think they lost theirs as well, didn't they? I don't remember what they said it
Thorin
was.
Stark lost his when he bent the knee.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
pretty
you're
sure.
right.
That would be when.
See, personally, I loved Sansa taking the throne in the north. It felt like this is what she's been going towards for how long. Like she, especially in the books, they make a lot of mentions that first season or two about like she is she'd be a perfect lady. Like she would have been the perfect queen, as in terms of a consort, a wife for Joffrey if he was able to, open his eyes and see anything that he had in front of
He
him.
wasn't a psychopath.
But she also spent the last how long, staying in the north. Like Jon was doing everything he could to save the north, to make sure they survived it, but Sansa was the one daily taking care of their problems and they're dealing with all the little things of actually running the place. I don't know if they don't actually mention if the North is going to follow the same thing of choosing their own successor. I do kind of wonder about that, or if she's planning on getting married.
Ooh.
I imagine she's not going to do it lightheartedly after her previous 3 marriages.
3. Truth.
Almost
Mhm.
3 too. She didn't actually marry Joffrey, I guess. But I really loved seeing that, and that it feels like she was coming into her own there. Go ahead, Nick.
So I had the book out, and we're talking about the different ports in the north. Bear Island is also an island in the north. Lyanna Mormont's home. So
Oh
probably
yeah.
make a, that's an entire island. So obviously in order to interact with the north, they'd have to have some boats or ships, and so they've got some mariners in the north.
No,
I was gonna say I thought both that Sansa would have the right to be the queen because Jon named her to rule in his stead, and then he, leaves. He comes back obviously for the long night, but then goes south with another army again. So the last person he named is that, gosh, stupid little thumbs up. The last person that he named would have been Sansa to rule. So the previous ruler would have given his okay that it be Sansa. But also, she is the one who then, whether we disagree how it happened, makes the North a full, free country, kingdom of its own, which is what they all wanted. So I would think that that's at least some foot in the door to say that she gets right to rule because she made it happen, and all the other lords of Westeros said that they would F off and leave them be. So I thought that was also something that gave her some credence to be queen in the North. Yeah, I thought that through her trials, clearly she does undercut Jon, and I agree with that sentiment. Tyler and a couple of people had made those. I think that is true. She does undercut a lot of what they say, but I think that she's earned at least the right to lead them in their current trajectory. Like if she ends up marrying somebody down the road, or if they want to try and pick something else when they hear that the other kingdoms in the south and the rest of the continent has picked their own leader, they might try to amend that or might revolt against her. But I think for right now, in the odd way that we've discussed, that the rest of the council just said, you can be leader, go for it, Bran. I think the way that she becomes queen is no more far-fetched.
All right.
Gary, that's nice of you to nod and agree with me. I just wanted to be on the record that everybody sees Gary thinks I'm smart. He agrees with what I'm saying.
No, I just shrugged and be like, whatever, Nick. Wrap it up.
I don't see your sign. I don't believe you. Tyler, you're up next. Nope.
So-
Go before he pulls it up.
Yep.
Go before he pulls it up.
So the final note I had about
Oh,
this
too late.
episode here was that we've touched on this multiple times here. This is basically an hour and 38-minute long finale that still needed more time to get done what it was trying to get done here.
Yup.
On to the favorite part of this is discussing the inside the episode part. Guess what? There is
isn't
no
one.
inside the episode for this entire thing. Because HBO, out of fear of basically backlash for it, because there was a lot of vitriol flying around the internet around this
What?
time, they pulled it basically. Like, it does exist, just we'll never
It does?
see it. Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Is it
know
on
that.
your super duper expensive Blu-rays?
My 4K does not come with very much extra features there, which I'm perfectly fine with because I don't watch most of that stuff anyways. But
Interesting.
that's
I thought it wasn't there
disappointing.
just because it ended. That was the it.
yeah, so
I mean, I love behind the scenes stuff. So Nick, they've just lost a sale for me. Like I would love
I'm sure you
audio
can find
commentary
a different
behind-
I think it
version
would have
than the one I
provided a lot
have,
of
Gary.
clarity, whether we agree with it or not. I think it would have provided some clarity for D&D to get on there and be like, this is why we did this, and we thought this was this and this and this. Even if we totally disagree with it, I thought it would have been interesting to hear what they would have said.
Yeah, I completely agree here too. But yeah, I searched the internet because I was like, I thought I had saw something about this existing somewhere, but no, it doesn't exist anywhere.
Huh.
But yeah. Does anyone have anything else to discuss about the episode other than Gary?
Other than Gary, this particular episode, we're going to talk conclusion and wrap up later. But
Yes.
I'm
just
gonna
this
part of my
episode, just
exit.
this episode,
Just this episode.
my thoughts were more analytical watching it, but I don't feel like my overall opinion, like last episode, thoughts, I don't think it changed all that much.
I guess maybe a question. Yeah, I guess we can cover that next episode if on a rewatch it changed as a whole,
I
or
guess
this last episode didn't change. Does anyone have anything else before I go through my last 3 evil points?
I have one last thing.
Evil.
Why are you going to end us on evil points, man? Bringing us down.
As the evil eye. But
What are your
I forgot
comments
how I know Tyler kept telling us every single time. I just forgot getting into this episode, just how this season and this episode specifically was like the theory of gravity accelerating at a constant 1g, and you don't really think it's that fast, and it just goes faster, and it goes faster, then it goes faster, and you're like, oh my god, slow down, take your time. So yeah.
Amanda, anything from
Okay.
you before we move on to Gary's final 3 points?
No, only snarky comments. I can't wait.
All right. Gary?
Okay. I noted, I guess, a question about the final interaction between Jon and Tyrion after it's decided he's gonna get I don't know, shuffled off to the north. And that was that they have kind of a heartfelt conversation where Tyrion has to apologize to Jon for telling him to make the decision to kill the queen. And I guess I thought there was some mirroring history of the two, where both of them had to kill a family member in cold blood, and both of them just had to sort of do it like I think Tyrion had to kill his father and his fiance. Jon had to kill his lover and niece, like in cold blood, like just to survive.
Daenerys was Jon's aunt, just as a FYI.
You're right. Gary's wrong occasionally.
you.
But I thought that was interesting that I didn't catch that the first time, that they were holding on to some grief. And just a side note, it is almost 2 a.m. and Nick is pouring himself more alcohol. I can't even right now. Cannot even.
This is how he's
Anyway.
getting to bed after this.
Yeah.
Don't be
apparently.
jelly. Gary's a little peanut butter and jealous. That's okay.
Fair enough. I also noticed in the Stark farewell, as I've been cluing in more to the familial relationships, is at no point during that interaction do they acknowledge how their familial relationship are. They don't explain that they're siblings. In reality, all 3 or 4 Starks are cousins, and they're all going their separate ways. But Jon isn't their sibling, and I think they've kind of all accepted that you know, that he's actually a cousin. He's still family. He's actually more family than he was before. But I thought that was, I don't know. I just always think it's interesting that they like literally don't ever acknowledge in any of those characters' interactions that they're actually cousins ever. And then the final note I wrote was Jon, when he walked away from the other Starks onto the boardwalk, onto a ship. He has like an effing Batman level cape walk. Like his cape goes like 3 times as wide as him, like as he's walking away. And I was just like, that was probably a little attempted. Like it was not accidental. It was a very heroic walk away.
Because we didn't need a white knight. We needed a I don't even know where I was going with this. I was going to try to call him the Dark Knight that everyone needed, but well.
I'm counting it.
Thank you.
We got a Batman reference.
He wasn't the Targaryen we needed. He was the snow we deserved.
Oh, I love it.
I'll count it. The last point I have is that
Targaryen we deserved.
Anyway, I started counting specific references this episode because I always started laughing in previous episodes. So just 1 Batman, a Ghostbusters, a Skyrim, 3 Star Wars references, and 3 Lord of the Rings references.
I also made another reference to a different movie that you guys didn't catch. I think Amanda might have caught it. I can't remember what it was now.
Well, then was it really
It doesn't count as a good
I know.
reference if no one understands it but you.
I know.
It was the twas I, something you said.
No, that wasn't the one. But that is
It's
one
another
actually. I
history
didn't even think
joke.
about that.
Anyway,
I,
that is
I
all.
feel like
Yeah,
I
that's all,
remember
Tyler.
this, but I don't remember what it is.
Damn it.
Are you good now, Gary? Got it out of your
All I
system?
got. Back to
All right.
you.
All right. Well, that basically does it for our time with watching Game of Thrones here as part of this podcast. As we've kind of alluded to make it more official, we do have one more episode planned after this. Our final goal here is basically to gather as a group, potentially in person for everyone. So there might be a little bit more over talking over one another, but we'll work on that when it comes time to do that. But we are planning to do one
Gary.
more wrap up episode to cover our final thoughts on our time here spent rewatching the Game of Thrones show. A year plus in the making, basically. We have come to this point where it is nearly over.
For reference, when we first started recording that, well, I guess I wasn't even part of this podcast when you guys first started recording it, but when I first started recording it, and then when Amanda started first recording it with us, I think she was just barely pregnant, and now I have a 1-year-old and a 1 year, 3-month-old.
There was definitely some time off we took for sure
Yeah.
in between some episodes.
Yeah,
It's
for
true.
sure.
But we will do all of that reflecting and more on our next episode. So please join us for episode 43, the final episode
Final countdown.
to rewatch the final episode to discuss Game of Thrones. I don't know. I was struggling with trying to figure out what do we call this thing here.
Words, man.
The final the wrap up episode.
The wrap up episode before our watch ends.
Boo.
See? Look at that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, thank you everyone for listening. We hope you have a good one. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, all.